Good morning, Chair. Chair, by the look of things, it looks as if we can start now, because I can see all members are in now, except those members that we have received apologies from them. I think we can start, Chairperson, the meeting.
Good morning, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Tourism.
Recording in progress.
Ladies and gentlemen who are part of our meeting, the delegation from Tourism Business of South Africa, TBCSA, that is coming to brief the committee. A very good morning, everyone. Honorable members, I request that I address this meeting with my video closed because I've been alerted that I do not have the best of connection. That is due to the rain that is pouring down in my area. We have heavy rains from last night. Till now, the rains are pouring down, and due to that, the network coverage sometimes becomes a challenge. But I hope I'm able to maintain this connectivity till the end of the meeting. Honorable members, allow me to welcome you to our Portfolio Committee on Tourism today, the 15th of March, as we listen to stakeholders who are working in the tourism space, in the tourism value chain, to brief us on the status of tourism and how far have we gone into of COVID. We know that since the advent of COVID-19 on our shores, tourism businesses and the value chain in tourism had devastation and long-lasting effects. To this day, there are businesses which have not been able to reopen, and others that have opened are barely breaking even. So as we pick up the pieces, we are on the recovery in the sector. We will hear from those who are the role players in the tourism sectors to brief the committee on work done, on how far, on where the challenges are, where they believe that the members of parliament, because we are the ones that create the environment in which their businesses operate, where can we assist them? Because we know that for tourism to succeed, we all need several role players who will come on board. Mr. Boltina, can you flight our agenda so that we are following a sequence of the agenda is adopted by us? Honorable members, the agenda is in front of us. I will invite Mr. Boltina, the Secretariat of the committee, to be able to take us through apologies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, the apologies that I have here in front of me, the first two are still standing apologies, Chair. The apology from the Chair of the Portfolio Committee, who she is still not well. The second one is from Honorable Gumbi, who's also not well as well, Chairperson. And then the third one is from Honorable Sitole. He has attended, Chairperson, the Portfolio Committee on Transport. Also, Honorable Moteka, I've also received a message from him as well. He has been admitted in hospital. I've also received, the Chair, also as well, the apology from DM that he will not be able to join this meeting. I saw when I started the meeting, I think the Minister is also in attendance, Chairperson, in this meeting as well. I saw her coming in. I hope she's still in the platform. I was also advised that the delegation from the Department of Tourism, from the entity, the SA Tourism, and also from the Office of the Auditor General, they are also in attendance in this meeting as observers, Chairperson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Poltina. Honourable members, on behalf of the committee, allow me to welcome the Minister of Tourism, Mayor Lindiwe Sisulu, the delegation from the department and the entity, and also those from the Auditor General. You are welcome to our meeting as the Portfolio Committee on Tourism, as we deliberate on issues and strategies to try and assist the sector in its recovery path. Honourable members, I will then invite a member who will duly move for the adoption of the agenda. Nozuko, can you mute your mic? Nozuko. Honourable members, I will invite you to be able to duly adopt, move for the adoption of the agenda so that we can be able to.
Honourable Chairperson.
You are noted, Honourable April.
I move for the adoption of the agenda as it is, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable April. Honourable April has moved for the adoption of the agenda. Can we have a seconder?
Honourable Chairperson, that's me. I do move the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you, Honourable Mieni has seconded the move by Honourable April. Honourable members, this is the agenda that we'll be following in the meeting of the 15th of March, as we are getting a briefing from TBCSA, that is Tourism Business Council of South Africa, on the status and the progress of recovery in the sector. They will also be briefing us on challenges and where there are strengths in the recovery path, since we know that tourism was brought on its knees by COVID-19. Due to the fact that tourism wanted people to converge, it was the first to be able to be brought down and closed so that we are able to curb the spread of this deadly virus. Honourable members, with those few words, allow me then to invite the Minister first, Messi Sulu, if you are on the platform, to greet us, if you have anything to say to the committee before we invite TBCSA. I do not hear nor see the Minister in the platform. I will then invite the chairperson of TBCSA. I saw there is Mr. Komani. We have had interactions with their organization several times. I will then invite the leader of the delegation to start briefing the committee and introduce their delegation to the portfolio committee.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And good morning, honorable members of the Tourism Portfolio Committee, Minister Sisulu, the delegation from the National Department of Tourism, and our colleagues from SA Tourism. Good morning. Good to see you all. And how I wish we were all sitting in Parliament and have this on a face-to-face basis. But I wanted to greet you, and I'm here with my delegation, the members of the Tourism Business Council, who are directors of the board. But Chair, maybe just as a quick briefing, as they say, time flies when you have fun and challenges. The last time we briefed this portfolio committee, which we're always grateful for the opportunity to brief this committee, was on the 23rd of February, 2021, just over a year ago. And as I say, this committee has always been gracious to allow us to share ideas, learn from each other, and also pave the way forward. And Chair, as you have already said, that our industry was hard hit, decimated. And I remember distinctly on the 23rd of February, when we're talking about the challenges that were facing us, I personally didn't think that our sector would be where it is today. So we've made progress, and part of the briefing today, Honorable Chair, will be to give this committee a progress report as where the sector is, and also share with you some of the obstacles that we still have to deal with in order to ensure that South Africa remains competitive as a destination. With that, Chair, I'll introduce my delegation, starting with me. My name is Blackie Komani. I'm the chairman of the Tourism Business Council. With me today, I have Mr. Aaron Monensi. Aaron is the CEO of the airline, ASA, the Airline Association for the domestic airlines. And Aaron is here to deal with issues that are aviation related. The second person from my delegation is Mr. Septi Bukula. Septi is the founder and the president of CISA, and an organization that develop small businesses. We also have Mr. Lindelwa Isabella, who is the director of sales and revenue at Tsokosan. We have George Motema, the CEO of BASA, an organization that is organized to look after international airlines that fly to South Africa. We have Ms. Hanneli Detroit, who represents SATSA, an association that deals with the tour operators who are dealing with ground arrangements. And last but by no means least, we have Mr. Chifue Chivengo, the CEO of the Tourism Business Council. Chair, those are that's my delegation today. But for us to move forward, Chair, I'll just set the scene, and then we'll allow our members, our delegation, to deal with the specific issues there, Chair, if that's fine with you.
No, that's perfectly okay. And with us, you can continue, Mr. Komani.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, I'll take you back briefly to what the TBCSA as a background. We established in 1996. We're a private sector-driven organization, and they work very closely with the Department of Tourism and the South African Tourism Board, the SA South African Tourism, and in marketing South Africa. I think, Chair, going back to your words of the 23rd of February 2021, when you said a positive image of South Africa is critical. And so in collaboration with the SAT, that's what TBCSA does. We collect levies, remit them to SAT, and in our effort to market South Africa and ensure that South Africa remains competitive as a destination. We are the voice of the industry. We raise issues on policy issues with relating to tourism. We deal with the Minister of Tourism. We deal with the department. We deal with other departments that affect tourism, i.e. transport, health during the pandemic, home affairs on visa issues. So, and those are policy issues that we get involved in, Chair. Our values, Chair, we strive for collaboration, as I mentioned, and also for the resilience of the industry. And Chair, hopefully the honorable members, when you go through the recovery that we have seen, will see that this industry has bounced back, and it's a matter of how we collectively, between ourselves and our partners in the National Department of Tourism and SAT, how we accelerate that recovery. Yeah. Chair, as I say, we've all agreed that the industry was decimated during COVID. And exactly to your point, to say that because we're a person-to-person sector, we were in a sector that was identified as a risk sector, and understandable so. You know, as someone said, the virus doesn't travel, people do travel. But I must say on this, we've received great support from the government in the form of TERS. Because if it wasn't for that, I think we'll say our sector would have been in a worse situation. And so as a sector, we're grateful for the collaboration that we're getting from the government. And also the speed at which the virus was contained in South Africa through Department of Health, through the protocols that were put in place, it saved a lot of lives. And also the matter of encouraging vaccination, it puts us in a much better position in the world that at least South Africans are getting vaccinated, and Omicron virus didn't get out of control. Chair, with the decimation of the industry, it was indiscriminate. Whether you're small business or big business or medium-sized business were all affected equally. Probably more small business affected in a big way because of the sizes of the business. But we're grateful to see that some of the small business have recovered nicely, and therefore, you know, we can only grow from here. One of the things that helped the recovery of the industry was the domestic travel. We've seen the surge in the domestic travel within South Africa because at that stage we had the red list, so foreigners were not coming to South Africa, but our domestic market really played a big role in our recovery. But with what's happening in the world, with the economy being under pressure, fuel prices rising, interest rates going up, food price going up, I think that domestic travel is going to take a knock. But I'm glad to say that even for the Easter weekend, you know, when we look at the forward books, the domestic travel is still quite strong, so which is a good sign. The impact on the global conflict between Ukraine and Russia, Chair, from the inbound point of view, we haven't seen much change. It's safe to say that the thing that's going to affect us is the fuel costs. What you'll see is that airlines are probably going to start imposing fuel surcharges. But in terms of our arrivals, we haven't received much cancellations when we talk to our partners. I think precisely because in terms of South Africa, Russia doesn't give us big volumes. It gives us high spenders, but not big volumes. Chair, the one thing that we'll address, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the PCR, we're going to talk about the confidence of the travelers. And the reason there, Chair, being that it's not so much, it's the uncertainty that causes this these concerns. When travelers travel, they worry that will we be locked in the country? What happens if there's a lockdown in the country? Will be able to return safely? What are the protocols? And these are issues, Chair, that I'd like us to, through this forum, that we can talk about. And I'm glad that Minister Sisulu is here. We can talk about the issue of the PCR, which most of the countries are dropping. And that creates an uncertainty in terms of the travel. And I'm sure my colleagues that are on the call will elaborate on that. With that, Chair, I will address the last slide. Then I hand over to my colleagues. As I said, the industry has, on average, the industry is operating at between 30 and 40% of its 29 capacity. And if you go to places like restaurants, over the weekend, restaurants are full. Hotels over the weekend, lodges are quite full. Because you're dealing with domestic travel, you'll find that during the week, it's a low value period. We saw in December, despite Omicron and us being on the red list of the UK and other European governments, our occupancies were quite high. And I'll ask Lindela from Tsokosan maybe to comment on this when she talks about domestic tourism. Government has started to travel, Chair, which is a good news and is a good sign of a recovery in tourism. Events and conferences, Chair, I remember distinctly in our meeting of the 23rd of February. This was the issue that was raised, that events and conferences are still constrained, and hopefully that this is a matter that can be addressed and that we can increase the occupancy and the capacity at which we can take these conferences. It's encouraging that we saw Meetings Africa taking place. I know that in Durban, preparations for tourism in Durban are taking place. So there's good movements, Chair. Chair, the jobs that you mentioned that we've lost over 470,000 jobs due to COVID, but that number would have been worse if it wasn't for TERS, the assistance that we got from the government. And so far, in the recent survey that we've done, only 37% of the employees are receiving 100% of the salary. And we see that within our group, that number is a true reflection of what's happening in the industry. International arrivals is improving, and my colleagues from the aviation, being George and Aaron, will comment on that. Chair, with that, I will hand over to my colleagues to address each of the details of the issues that that's correct. Yeah, I'll hand over to my colleagues. Maybe let me start with Chief. Chief, if you can talk about the PCR test. I know that there's some great progress that is made on that. And hopefully the minister on the call or the members from NDT can give us an update on where we are with the PCR. Chief?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, the Chairman of the Portfolio Committee on Tourism, the members of the Portfolio Committee, the Minister of Tourism, colleagues from the Department of Tourism, as well as colleagues from South African Tourism. I will touch on the issue of PCR testing. We all know that since the beginning of COVID, we've had many challenges in terms of what are the requirements for those that are traveling into the country as well as out of the country in terms of regulations that we've put in place. And one of those requirements for traveling into South Africa that was put in place at some point during COVID is that anyone who is traveling into South Africa will require a PCR test that's not less than 72 hours before they depart, meaning that anyone has to be tested. They have to be negative for them to be able to travel to South Africa. Now, That requirement was widely accepted across the globe because many countries were doing similar thing. It was a standard then that anyone that is traveling must be tested, because we all didn't know the severity of COVID-19, and we were still learning, and new information was still coming into the fore. As time went on, and I remember last year when we started to know more, about the disease, and this was based on the fact that South Africa had the beta variant, or we discovered the beta variant, of which the world then stigmatized us in terms of calling it a South African variant. We had to fight against, those red listings that were imposed on those that were traveling into South Africa when they returned home. And fast forward from that, we also then discovered the Omicron. And again, when we discovered the Omicron, the world, named it as a South African variant, and the red listing, came back, meaning that, we had two instances that we worked, on, where we were, trying and successfully reopen the country for international inbound tourism. Now, there's one thing that is still left that doesn't give confidence to the travelers that want to come to South Africa, is the PCR, the negative PCR test that we still require as a country for the travelers that want to come to South Africa. Now, the PCR test has various issues attached to it that makes people not want to come to South Africa. Number one is that it's costly. We have done some exercises in terms of the cost associated with PCR tests in the UK and USA. And for a family of 4, they will have to spend close to 10,000 Rand to get PCR tests. In addition to that, they are not even sure if they're going to be traveling to South Africa. And if you look at them, if they are vaccinated, they don't see any reason why they should be doing that, because they may not have any symptoms. So the cost is quite high to get a PCR test in those countries. And that money, when it gets spent on PCR tests, it means that they will spend less money when they arrive here in South Africa, and therefore we're losing out on that 10,000 Rand. The second part of it is that it's not easy to get. Yeah, in many countries, you have to book, you have to travel a distance to get it, and that discourages people from trying to go to a destination that require a negative PCR test, especially when they're fully vaccinated. Now, what we have seen is that in the UK, the PCR test requirement deters about 47% of wannabe travelers, meaning that we are losing out on potential travelers that may not come to South Africa. And when we quantify this number, if we continue with the negative PCR regime for those people that are fully vaccinated and that don't show any symptoms, we may lose 400,000 tourists every year, or this year, at least when we still have this PCR test. And if you look at that, and you look at how much one person spent in the country, which is around 31,000 Rand, potentially we're going to lose around 12.4 billion Rand just because we continue with the PCR requirement. So it's very important that when we talk about the tourism recovery, we have touched on domestic, but when you talk about international, you got to give confidence. And the confidence is that people will be able to travel to the destination when they are fully vaccinated. They should be able to get on those planes, of course, not showing any symptoms, and they should be able to arrive here and, enjoy our destination and spend money so that the 470,000 jobs that we've lost and the 37% of people that are, only getting 100% salaries can increase. So we have to, as number one, do away with PCR tests or negative PCR tests for fully vaccinated travelers. Of course, if someone is not vaccinated, they will require to bring a PCR test. If we do that, we'll open up the market. We will be more competitive. If you look into, Southern Africa, or if within the Africa region, the countries like Kenya have done away with negative PCR tests for fully vaccinated travelers. Rwanda has done the same. Botswana have done the same. So we as South Africa, we're still lagging behind in terms of making that decision to gain competitive advantage. So, which means that when travelers in our source markets make a decision on where to travel, they first make a decision on where to travel based on ease of travel. Is it easy to get there? What are the COVID requirements? Do I need to get, 10 things before I get into the country? And PCR requirement is one of those, which means that, as I've said, if we do away with it, we'll be more competitive. We may actually see our forward book improving. So it is one of the things that we're saying is still a challenge. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be addressed urgently for South Africa as a destination to be competitive. If we don't do so, I've given the numbers of, the potential, jobs that we could have, the potential tourists that we could have, and the amount of money that we could lose. And if we do the right thing by the PCR, we should be able to support about 100,000 jobs. So is that important for our industry? It is something that's a challenge that we do ask, an assistance in it, and we ask for speed on it to make sure that the industry reopens, can be able to sustain itself, and we can be able to sustain the jobs that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO. I hope members will comment on that, and that Minister Sisulu probably can give us a direction as to where things are insofar as that is concerned. Thank you so much, CEO. Chair, I will now ask my colleagues from the aviation sector, being Aaron and George, to give us a picture, one, as to where things are in terms of aviation, the capacity, and also the challenges that are taking place. And for George specifically to maybe brief us as to how many international airlines have returned, and what are the frequencies, and how does the future looks like insofar as the international inbound airlines are concerned. Maybe I'll start with Aaron.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Tourism. Good morning to the Minister of Tourism, Honorable Minister Sisulu. Good morning to members of the Portfolio Committee on Tourism, colleagues from the tourism industry, colleagues from the travel industry. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given us as Aviation Airlines Association to be part of this meeting. Chair, the first thing that I would like to point out is that, as was said before by the CEO of TBCSA, the numbers show that people are willing to travel domestically, as well as regionally. They are willing to travel if the fares are suitably attractive, and if people can reach their markets and destinations, the destinations that they want to get to, without having to double guess the requirements. So the requirements that have been placed on their ability to travel is acting as a deterrent. In as much as the people are willing to travel for tourism, for business, for leisure, to visit friends and relatives, the moment they start thinking about the arbitrary requirements that are placed on them, it becomes a deterrent and they actually become reluctant to travel. So we have seen over the past 6 months a very solid growth of domestic tourism, simply because the requirements from a domestic point of view are not as stringent. But from a SADC, Southern African Development Community point of view, the numbers are still restricted. Obviously, like the CEO of TBCSA has mentioned, in December, there was quite a heavy build-up until the Omicron announcement was made, and then we were put on the red list, not only by the Europeans, the UK and Americans, but even some of our neighboring countries in the SADC region, like, for example, Zimbabwe, like, for example, Mauritius, like, for example, Seychelles, like, for example, Madagascar. As we speak, Madagascar still has a moratorium on South Africans traveling to and from Madagascar. So that sort of dampened the pent-up potential that was already building up to December. And traditionally, January and February are what we call dead months as far as travel demand is concerned, because traditionally people would have traveled during the festive season up to the first and second week of January, and after that it's dead quiet. Children have gone back to school and people have gone back to work, and there's very little travel. So that's the first point we want to make, to say the travel, the penchant for travel is still there. People still want to travel. And the second thing I want to mention, Chair, is by far the juiciest piece of what would have been a low-hanging fruit, which was well within the grasp of South Africa, was the appointment of the air services licensing councils, both domestic and international. And these councils had been defunct for more than 11 months until last week when they were appointed. And we kept saying, we are actually scoring an unnecessary own goal, because what that means is if we don't have the air services licensing council, both for domestic and international, what it means is that South African airlines that want to either increase their frequencies from a domestic point of view, or even increase their frequencies from within, from points outside South Africa, they could not do that because their applications were getting into a bottleneck at the licensing councils. They were not being processed for a year. The own goal comes from when you realize that we have lost 470,000 jobs. And yet, other countries that are competing with us, because they don't need the requirement of a licensing council, all they needed was a foreign operator's permit, which was granted by right by the Department of Transport. So they were able to commence or increase their frequencies into South Africa, thereby taking jobs that would have been South African jobs, thereby taking income from the airlines that could have been South African income that would have bolstered our own economy. And for us, this was an unnecessary own goal. But we are grateful that the licensing councils have been appointed. Our ask is that now that licensing councils have been appointed, they need to act very quickly. They literally need to hit the road running. There is a backlog of applications for new frequencies, new destinations, and new operations. Those applications need to be fast-tracked so that we can catch up with the loss that we've endured for the past year without the licensing council. The third thing that I would like to mention as far as aviation is concerned, in parallel, we have to get more people, especially business travelers flying again. Over the past 2 years, we have been able to demonstrate that it is actually very safe to travel by air. We have done this continuously by making sure that we adhere to the restrictions and the protocols required by the various ministry declarations, everything that has been required. We've made very great progress in restoring people's confidence in the safety and health of traveling by air. But when it comes to travel within the SADC region, people are still unwilling to book in advance because of the arbitrary requirements that from time to time are pronounced. And the CEO of TBCSA mentioned this earlier on to say that just by having the PCR requirement, for example, the UK alone, we are losing 47% of potential travel. From a SADC point of view, by having the PCR test requirement, we are losing an additional 28% of travel that would ordinarily come up because, number one, the advantage of SADC is that there is no requirement for visa. So people would actually book within a 48-hour period. But the mere fact that they need to have a PCR test within a 72-hour period immediately puts brakes on their requirements to travel. And we are losing up to 28%. And from a monetary point of view, that equates in a year, that equates to close to 280,000 passengers traveling into South Africa. And that's a significant amount of number of passengers that would have equated to almost $58 million that they would spend on travel and on their hotel accommodation and other expenditures. So, Chair, this is a very important point for us. We would like for the Minister of Tourism to engage with other ministries of tourism in the region to try and, number one, harmonize the protocols required for people to travel to and from or within the SADC region. There is absolutely no reason right now. We have demonstrated over the past 2 years, we know what works and what doesn't work. And we know that traveling does not actually increase the incidence of the incidences of COVID. What increases the incidence of COVID are the protocols that have been put in place. And the last thing we would like to remind the committee chair is our sustainability as an aviation industry depends entirely on our ability to enable and facilitate trade. So that means the cost of travel is very significant in the decision-making process. We would want to have an assistance that comes from the Department of Transport and any other service providers that are state-owned to either maintain the costs as they are, because already studies have shown that the cost of travel, the amount that goes to the airline is very little compared to the costs that are maintained by airports, service providers, and so forth. The percentage that is given is that 69% of the cost of an air ticket does not reside with the airline, 69%. Only 31% goes to the airline. And for that 31% that goes to the airline, a significant 28% goes to fuel and other charges that the airline has to pay. The airline will only retain 6% of the airfare that is charged. We are appealing that we can work together with the service providers to retain or maintain the costs as they are, so that we can at least see a significant increase in the uptake of travel. And at a later stage, in 2 or 3 years' time, we can then talk about increasing the cost, because we also are aware that their costs are also increasing. But we can actually maintain the costs as they are at this particular level in order for us to encourage the travel to come up. And then that when the travel comes up, tourism comes up. I will stop at this juncture, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for that briefing on the domestic scene. Aaron, before you go away, man, I know the members of the Portfolio Committee would probably want to understand the impact of the grounding of Comair in the travel in the domestic market, and if you have any update, if you're at liberty to say something, because Comair is your member. I think for Aaron, if you can't, it's fine. If you can, please, if you can just brief the committee on that.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's a very heavy bus that you have lifted for me, but you are my chair. I'll take the bus, Chair. So first and foremost, the grounding of Comair is a necessary evil. Air travel is unrelenting when it comes to safety. Safety is a non-negotiable, Chair. So the reason that was given by the Civil Aviation Authority was that Comair did not comply with certain aspects of their safety audits from a safety management system point of view and from a quality management point of view. And those processes are being followed right now as we speak. The impact, Chair, is that the two brands, Comair and Kulula, were putting together an average of 35 to 40% of the seats in the domestic market. So that means by being grounded, 35 to 40% of the capacity has been taken out of the market. But fortunately, we have other airlines like South African Airways, like South Air, Chem and others that have been able to fill the gap. So there is no significant, can I say, impact in terms of lack of capacity. But what it does also, Chair, is it shows the whole world how serious we are as far as our protocols in terms of safety is concerned. And that gives us the continued credibility that we require. Going forward, Chair, we are constantly in touch with Civil Aviation Authority to make sure that the audits that need to be carried out are carried out timelessly, and our members are being kept informed of whatever the gaps that need to be filled, they'll be filled. But right now, the only thing that you don't see the Kulula and Comair brand in the air, but in terms of capacity, the capacity has been filled by other airlines. I hope I've answered your question, Chair.
And thank you so much. George, on the international inbound airline, just paint the picture for the portfolio committee.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the Chair of the Portfolio Committee, as well as the members of the committee. Good morning to Minister and members of the department, as well as my colleagues. I think my colleague Aaron has already really dealt in details, some of the issues that we're facing as international airlines. As my counterpart, the issue that was raised around the PCR is really something that, almost every single day I get calls from regional managers who are representing all of our international airlines coming into the country around the issue of the PCR, because the travel market on the ground really indicates from their point of destination, from origin to destination, that PCR test is really an inhibitor. And that in itself, it impacts on the profitability of our airlines. We may look at it from a traveler's point of view, as Chief Fiwa has already said. Look, a traveler would obviously look at that from a point of travel. But from an airline point of view, our members look at that in terms of, route profitability. And that in itself impacts on decisions that are made by international airlines, whether or not to continue in a particular market. And that's really a serious issue that we believe that perhaps through the minister, that we should engage the Department of, we know that obviously the National Command, Coronavirus Command Council has been having meetings in order to look into these regulations. But that's something that really needs to be pushed quite urgently, because it will change the picture in terms of the numbers, in terms of what is coming into our country. We can clearly see, and I think that's why our view is that tourism should really be taking a lead in this regard, because we know that in the past 2 years, since we've had COVID, quite honestly speaking, we can see the numbers have changed from business travel. Pre-COVID, business used to travel, passenger numbers used to be higher than your tourism numbers. But what we are seeing is that there is a growth in that market, and that growth needs to be nurtured. And in order for us to nurture that, as supporting what the minister has put together as the tourism recovery plan, we need to be in the forefront as tourism to try and push, the Department of Health, to get into that space of removing this inhibitor. Of course, we do take into consideration the health issue. Now, I'm sure, the council will look into those issues. The second issue that I would want to emphasize, without getting into too much details, as my counterpart, as I said, has already spoken about these issues, is the issue with the Department of Transport. And again, I go back to the Department of Tourism, that we would like the minister to assist us in that regard, because the Department of Tourism, of Transport should be seen in itself as a regulator that should create an enabling environment, for our members to be able to continue to operate into the South African market. Now, what we see, which is one critical issue that has been raised with me by my members, is, in the last 2 years, this appointment that has just been approved only recently by Cabinet, which the department has delayed in appointing the International Air Service Licensing Council, has a lot of question in the minds of our members in view of issues such as insurance. For instance, the way the extension has been done was, the foreign operators licenses permits were extended through a correspondence, and the question was whether or not does that in itself even comply with the legislation, because it is the council that's supposed to be making such approval. And in our view, that council should have been appointed long before the term of that board expired. That in itself really places our members in difficult situations, whether to continue to operate in the South African environment. And I think the Department of Tourism should assist us, because I think we've been trying and doing everything that we can to try and tap into the Department of Transport. We don't seem to be winning in that portfolio, and in my view, it has really become a stumbling block, for the aviation sector. I think those are the two issues that I wanted to raise. My chair has asked for me to give a percentage of the airlines that have already returned. in the country. So we have about 31 international airlines flying into the country who are our members. I think we've got about 2 that are not our members, but we are in the process of getting those back on board. But of the 31 airline members, we have about 80% of those back in the country. I've had a meeting with Air Mauritius, for instance. We've seen the likes of Air Mauritius that have suspended their travel into South Africa, that they are keen in coming back into the country. And the second issue is the likes of El Al, which is an Israel airline that has not operated for the last 2 years since COVID. Has also returned in terms of putting its flight back into the country. That is really positive. So if we could try and address some of these inhibitors that our members are experiencing, I think that would help us to see our members, facilitating the increase of the frequencies into the South African environment, and that in itself is the benefit for the country. I thank you, Chair. I think those are the 2 issues that one needed to just put across. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, George. It's encouraging to see that international airlines are returning because we need those volumes. Thank you so much, George. On the inbound challenges, which I'm sure the Portfolio Committee has said this so many times, and so is the Minister and the Ministry, the National Public Transportation Regulation, which is a big inhibitor, and it's within our reach within our powers to fix that. I'm going to ask Haneli to address issues and also talk about what we see as a stopgap solution whilst there's a search for a long-term solution. But Haneli, can you take the committee through where we are with this and the impact it has on businesses across the value chain? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Blackie. And so let me just get in here quickly. Apologies. So Honourable Chair, Minister, members of the Portfolio Committee and colleagues, we so welcome your offer of assistance in recovery of the tourism industry. And we're talking about a matter here, as the Chair said, that has been brought to your attention or to many people's attention a number of times. I'm going to try and just summarize that, but it is a hefty issue. It is an issue of red tape. It is an issue that has been outstanding since 2015. So we talk about COVID bringing our industry to its knees, but wheels operators were already on their knees in front of government prior to COVID. And we wish it was a case like with aviation, where it's only a one-year issue. But the National Public Transport Regulator and their process for obtaining operating licenses is a systemic failure in the South African platform. It's causing severe economic and reputational damage to the tourism industry. It is inhibiting growth and job creation, small, medium, and large enterprises, and it's resulting in job losses and business closures. And this has been the case, as I said, for the last 7 years. Our industry is fully supportive of a system that ensures compliance. We want this. As a matter of fact, SATSA when the permitting was still sitting with the PREs, and apologies, I got diagnosed with COVID yesterday, so it's a very good thing that we are talking on Zoom. My mind is a little bit confused with the fever and stuff, but this is such an incredibly important issue that we do have to talk about it. So as I said, industry is very supportive. We were part of the process, SATSA, in those years of requesting that taxis and tourism be separated, and that's part of what the National Public Transport Regulator needs to do. So our operators, and as SATSA, we represent 1,300 companies in the inbound space. So anything, with international tourists coming into South Africa, obviously we were very much at the, behest of COVID and the impact that it had on us. But these operators are trying. They really are. You know, in some cases they've sent over 50 documents to try and get an operating license, and it is sort of beyond comprehension that, you know, you are asking government to give you an operating license or a license to do your job, and it's just simply not coming through. I remember at one of the consultative meetings that we had, the then chair of the MPTR committee said that getting an operating license is a privilege and not a right. It was really shocking, but, you know, I digress. So we have tracked applications that went into the MPTR over the past few years, before, specifically pre-COVID. We had 184 applications that was captured. Out of that, only 33% completed successfully. 33%. That's literally 279 vehicles, tourism vehicles, buses, quantums, etc., that were not able to operate or not able to operate legally. And what is the scary thing is people have a choice between either operating illegally and put food on the table, or, you know, just closing their businesses and finding jobs and income in different sectors. So the Act very clearly states that it is a 60-day turnover. We've had people 4 years waiting for their operating licenses. So many of them they've paid for the operating licenses, they've then closed their business down, and that money has never even gone back to them either. So I wanted to just read maybe one example. There's so many, and I'm very happy to share that with you guys. I had to close my company. This is Bomo Tours. I had to close my company due to not getting an operating permit. I had 3 buses. I sold the lot and retrenched the driver and could not give freelance work anymore. Now he started as a sole operator, and he's waiting since September 2019 for accreditation, and since March 21 for an operating license. So really, if I just sort of capture what the challenges are, it's the way that the board at that stage, the MPTR Transport Committee or Licensing Committee, interpreted and implemented the National Transportation Act. So instead of trying to look for reasons, and I'm just going to, call it what it is, trying to look for reasons to give operating licenses, it was actively looking for reasons not to the point where operators had to provide business plans, had to provide proof of demand in order for, for this board to see whether they should have an operating license or not. The process was still very much approached as a taxi service, and we know in the taxi industry, the routes are very important. So our tourism industry is required to say what routes they're going to drive. But you've got an international tourist coming into South Africa that wants to go and explore. It was totally irrelevant to ask for some of that criteria. There's insufficient capacity. This has been admitted by the MPTR right from the beginning. What is quite sad is that we reached out right from the start. We had said anything. We literally would process documents. We communicated to our members. There was a lot of confusion when the new process was launched initially, and we had to almost write up our own guide to provide to the industry on how to apply to the MPTR. The requirements are changing all of the time, so they ask for BE certificates, with the BE certificates we can understand, but route descriptions, business plans, historical invoices, reference letters, letters of motivation. It's almost as if every time somebody provides a document, they're looking for another one to ask for to stall the process. There's a lack of understanding of the tourism sector, as I mentioned, with the route descriptions. It's just not a relevant thing in the tourism industry at all. And it does hamper transformation. It's not just the fact that there has been job losses and there's been millions of rands of revenue that has been lost, but it's also the potential jobs that would have been created. So right now, those people with operating licenses are not changing their vehicles at all. They're hanging onto their vehicles because that's the only way for them to operate legally. But that causes risk in the vehicles not being, updated. So they would have bought a new vehicle to do that, but they're not doing that. We've just had an accident 2 weeks ago, a very unfortunate accident on the Schoemanskloof Road on the N4 with 3 Belgian tourists that had passed away. Now, in an instance like that, if there is not an operating license and a valid operating license on the vehicle, thankfully in this instance there was, the operator would be up for manslaughter. They would be arrested. They would have to answer to court. So it is quite a serious thing. So those that are operating illegally, and of course we are saying to them not to, but it's a matter of putting bread on the table. And they, when they do operate illegally, the traffic department does pull vehicles over and check for operating licenses. The vehicles are then impounded and tourists are left sort of stranded, which is, from a reputational point of view, it's not a great thing. So just to go back to it, we really are open to, we want to work together. We want to make this work for the industry. We agree that there needs to be some sort of accreditation or way to say that these are credible transport operators. So we have, from initiation, as I said, in 2015, taken on this issue. We have spoken then to Minister Hanekom. We have taken it through to Minister Kaza. We've gone back to Hanekom again. Then we've spoken to Minister Ngubane and Minister of Tourism, Minister Sisulu. This is a matter that we haven't physically or face-to-face raised with you yet, but I'll just explain where we are in the process now. So literally, having knocked at these doors until our knuckles bleed, we've had to take the process legal. And this is SATSA as an association, as an independent association that is the voice for inbound tourism. We had sent an initial letter of demand, and the letter of demand simply was to say that these are the applications that are outstanding, and we would like the department to process and complete those the applications. Because there is no NPTR board at the moment. So maybe just to go back into that to explain, there was a board, they completed their duties, and this was through meetings with the acting and then the director of transport with our chair Blackie Kumane, and discussing these issues, and they then realized that the current board at that stage was not properly applying the act, and they decided that they were going to have a new board, which was a great step for us. A new board was then put together or appointed, but very soon after that, and this was just before, at the beginning of 2020, just before COVID, the new board was then dissolved because they were not legally, or there was some issue around the legalities of the application or appointment. I was not 100% sure about that. But literally since then, so the Department of Tourism closed down from April to November, not the Department of Tourism, the MPTR, National Public Transport Regulator, and then opened again in November 2020, but since then have not been able to do any work. So they are taking applications, they are processing the applications, they are taking the payment for that, but they are not able to issue the operating licenses because the board has not sat. There is no board. We finally got confirmation that there is no board after many phone calls, emails, trying to follow up with them 2 weeks ago that sort of in writing that there is no board. So as I said, we've had to take this process legal, although we don't want to. I mean, we've all seen that article about the billions of rands of legal cases against government at the moment, simply to ask them to do their job, and we don't want to contribute to that. This is not something, it costs a lot of money. We're supposed to be focusing on our recovery and getting tourism back up. So going to court is not the option for us, but it's not the ideal option, but it is the option that we will have to take. So we sent the first letter of demand, literally just to issue the applications that we listed. That was not responded to. We have sent the second one, which is the deadline is the 18th of March, that we've asked them to respond. And then, failing that, we would have to launch a legal case, and it would be an urgent legal case because, it is lives and livelihoods that we are talking about here. So for us, just very simply then, the solution is a moratorium on operating licenses, and there's various ways, details. We've actually written up documents about how we could do that, just to help MPTR as well, to get back on their feet, to get a board going, to work with the industry to apply the Act in a positive manner, in a manner of looking to get somebody an operating license instead of not. And in that time, whilst there is a moratorium and people are able to at least operate legally and get tourism going again, that there is a task team that can work with private sector and government. And I'm going to, Dr. Ishmael Vadi, that was the Gauteng MEC of Roads and Transport. He did a fantastic job in Gauteng with their provincial regulator entity when they were stuck with huge delays. He put a moratorium on and he sorted out the systems in order for them to be able to license efficiently. So he would be an ideal kind of person, for instance, who would be heading a task force to be able to look at what options and how we can structure it to make it work properly. And yeah, that's so thank you very much to all of the colleagues and honorable members and our Chair Blackie Kumane. I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
Thanks so much, Haneli. I hope you recover soon on COVID. All the best. Chair and members, I'm sure we'll debate this, but key to this, Chair, is that issues like these are within our control. They inhibit our recovery. This is not something new, started in 2015. We just have to have the will to deal and address these issues and do so speedily, because the net impact of these delays, one is the cost, to ground transportation, because you're limiting the supply of ground transportation. The few that will have permits will operate, but so will the cost will go up because you have fewer supplies. The other big thing is that in terms of job recoveries, we're creating our own problem. Without this being resolved, it's difficult for operators to operate. On the other hand, you're encouraging small businesses to start businesses, but if they can't get simple things like permits, how are they going to operate? Chair? So I'd like us, when we conclude, Chair, when it's a handover back to you, that this matter be revisited and at least once and for all come up with a solution to this, Chair. So with that, I will ask Ms. Lindela Isabel to talk about domestic travel, tourism. As I said, this was one of our big saviors, but also talk about the conferencing space as well as the sports tourism in terms of the restrictions that we're facing. Isabel? Absolutely, Lindela.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, honorable members of the committee, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, as well as my colleagues. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to talk to you about some of the challenges that we are facing as an industry. Although I sit here representing Tsukosan Hotels, I speak on behalf of the entire accommodation sector when it comes to tourism. I'll start off with the meetings, incentives, conferences, and events sector. The current regulations and restrictions of 50% of capacity of the venue, or 1,000 people indoors and 2,000 outdoors, with the seating spread out to ensure a 1.5 meter social distancing, is quite prohibitive in terms of maximizing on opportunities that the meetings industry has to give. The menus that we have to serve, the serving standards we've had to adjust, having to make sure that people don't serve their own meals, is also quite labor intensive. We do believe that this is a time for our meetings industry to open up. We are quite grateful that we had Meetings Africa in February at the Sandton Convention Center. And that showed that South Africa and the industry in general is quite ready to start doing business in the meetings and incentive space. The meetings and incentive space does not only affect the accommodation providers, it also affects the PCOs and event organizers. PCOs are the professional conference organizers, because a lot of them generate revenue out of these meetings. So the attendance of members is quite critical. And if there are limited numbers in terms of capacity, the PCO will either cancel the event or postpone the event. With COVID-19, we saw quite a number of events being postponed and quite a lot of them being cancelled. And in the international space, we were impacted upon hugely because a lot of these conferences and events rotate. And if you miss an opportunity to host the event over a certain period of time, the destination changes and they move over to other countries. So we did miss quite a lot of opportunities over the past 2 years to host some of these events. And these events also not only help to showcase the tourism component of our country, they also help in terms of business development and investment opportunities as well. So we do need to open up the opportunities for the meetings industry. And we all know that as we're sitting here, we're talking via Zoom, and I think the most preferred way of communication is when you can see the individuals that you're talking to, because that's how humans connect. So as soon as we can have physical meetings and manage the restrictions and the regulations that are in place, the better it is going to be for all of us. We do believe that the time has come for meetings to begin, for people to meet in person and to feed off each other's energy. Like I have indicated, honorable members, there were quite a number of international events that were postponed since last year. And this has had a huge impact on our hospitality industry. And you have seen the numbers of the people that were retrenched, the numbers of people that are still on layoff, not earning their full salaries. Some of them have lost their households, some of them have lost their cars, and this has also led to the breakdown of the family units. So we do believe that as soon as we relax all these restrictions and regulations, the better it is going to be for our industry. The exhibitions have also been cancelled. As you know, the exhibition industry relies heavily on attendance. If people do not attend these exhibitions, then the organizers do not generate any source of revenue, whilst the cost of setting these up have either gone up or they have stayed the same. So what has happened is that a lot of these exhibitions have been cancelled completely because the 50% capacity being or the limitations in terms of numbers have made it unaffordable for exhibition organizers to put together these exhibitions, because they generate their revenue out of the number of participants in terms of the exhibitions, as well as the number of attendants. So the participants will decide whether to participate or not based on the volumes or footfall that comes through the exhibition floor space. So it is a double-edged sword, because if you don't have exhibitors, then you won't have people coming through. But if you won't have people coming through, you will not have exhibitors, because they make their money out of the volumes of people that come through the venues. As I have indicated, PCOs make their income out of these events, and they have therefore mostly been unemployed. So the impact on the MICE sector has been quite huge. On the positive side, though, we have seen quite a lot of increase in domestic travel. We are grateful that people can travel within our country. As much as there has been a negative impact in terms of airlift and people traveling outside of South Africa, we have seen the benefits as an industry of domestic tourism and how people were given an opportunity to explore their own country. When we look at the last quarter of the last year, 2021, being October to December, it was for us the best trading quarter since COVID-19 hit us. And it has, Durban as a destination contributed largely to these numbers because it is a self-drive destination more than it is a fly-in destination. Cape Town, we haven't seen really the numbers picking up that drastically because of the airlift capacity, the cost capacity, and also because Cape Town is largely dependent on the international market. And for the international market to travel, we need to do away with some of the challenges, including the PCR testing that our CEO, Mr. Chipiwa Chivenga, has spoken about. My colleagues from the aviation industry have also indicated the challenges that impact on our international travelers coming through. So when it comes to Cape Town as a destination, we haven't really seen much uptake, but in December, we did see a lot of people traveling locally. So the domestic leisure tourism has been our backbone, and it has sustained us as an industry. And this was followed by government travel and sports. Sports is still a challenge, Honorable Chair and members, because what we're seeing right now is that we are able to accommodate some of the sporting teams. We are able to provide biobubble environments for them, but we do need the spectators to travel for them to be able to see and watch their favorite teams. It does help with the morale, but it also helps us as an industry, because what happens is that people travel outside of their homes and outside of their domestic areas and into other regions when we have sporting events. So if this committee can please engage with the Minister of Sports and everybody else who has an influence on that section, so that we can open up the stadiums, because the stadiums not only boost domestic travel, but they also boost entertainment and the entire value chain. When you look at hospitality, tends to benefit. Spectators do put bums in beds or heads on pillows, as we now say, and we do need their ability to attend and watch these games for us to see an upside in that segment as well. Sports spectators provide different revenue streams for our industry, and those also extend beyond just accommodation, because they do spend a lot on entertainment. So we see an increase in terms of food and beverage spend and revenue generated. Having said that, Durban has been our backbone. Domestic travel has been our backbone. Sport has supported us. Government has supported us in terms of government travel. We need now to start ensuring that corporates do travel. We need to open up the airlines. We need to do away with PCR testing, and we request the assistance of the committee to bring our sector back into business. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lindelwa. I think, Chair, you will see the importance of domestic tourism, which is always the backbone of any successful tourism destination. You know, one of the issues that was raised at some point, Chair, was the issue of long weekends. For instance, for the human rights long weekend, which is 21st of March, you'll battle to get accommodation in certain places in South Africa because they're fully booked. So the issue there was that there must be some holidays. I mean, if you look at countries like the US, where I lived for a long time, you know, there's no holiday that takes place during the week. Most of their holidays are over the weekend, which extends long weekends. So if you ask us, Chair, what could be done, maybe that's one of the things that we should look at to say, how do we increase our long weekends? Because COVID has taught us a lesson that international travelers, the day that you stop flying, that market dries out, and your domestic market becomes your basis for keeping the sector alive. With that, I'm going to go to our last speaker, Septi, who is the chairman of our Growth and Transformation Committee. And Septi is sometimes he wants us to conduct these our transformation committees meetings in Xhosa. So if he starts speaking in Xhosa, Chair, don't be surprised. Septi.
Chair, thank you so much for the invitation, and to the Chair of the Portfolio Committee, to the Portfolio Committee, and to the Honourable Minister and my colleagues, and the Abulis. Greetings to you all this morning. So thanks for the opportunity, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief, but I thought maybe, you know, I could start by stating the obvious, and it's come up already from the briefings that my colleagues have given. Stating the obvious that, you know, transformation, because that's what I'm going to talk about, is a shared responsibility between the public sector and private business, private sector. When I say public sector, I mean not just government. I mean, you know, quasi-governmental institutions as well, like universities when it comes to skills development, and CETAs also when it comes to skills development, on the one side. So there are things that fall squarely within the public sector, which we as the private sector can't do much about. And they have a direct bearing on how fast we can drive transformation. But certainly there are things that fall squarely within the ambit of the private sector. And those are our responsibility to see to in terms of driving transformation. And there are those that are shared between us, between the public sector and the business sector. And the reason, Chair, I'm starting like that is to say that, from a constructive point of view, I think what we need to do as a matter of urgency is to find one another in terms of all these issues, categorizing them and really joining hands in working together to drive transformation. The chairperson of the South African Tourism Transformation Council, which is Lindiwe Sangwenesido, is very diligent in always reminding us as the business sector to keep transformation front and center, even in difficult times like we are facing with COVID-19, which has set these processes back significantly, as my colleagues have already indicated. But we try to do our best to make sure that we don't sideline transformation issues. We keep focused on them. So with that as my introductory remarks, I just want to note certain things that I think are positive that we're observing, and touch on a couple that perhaps we can get assistance on. And I'm not going to repeat what has already been said by my colleagues. We will all be aware that at the end of this month, the South African National Parks is having a tourism investment conference on the 31st of March. And the reason I'm mentioning that, Chair, is because that conference focuses on public-private partnerships in tourism. And I'm mentioning it also because we're very grateful that Sun Parks, which is part of what I categorize as the public sector, has made it very clear that, of the pipeline of projects that they're going to be presenting there that are going to be released onto the market, from within the next 3 to 10 years, they're going to be very focused on ensuring that transformation is driven. And that's key, Chair, because that really offers significant opportunity. Utilizing the assets that are owned and controlled by the public sector, by the state and its agencies, using those assets to drive transformation, Chair, is absolutely critical. So I think it's encouraging to us to hear that Sun Parks, among the state agencies, is focused on that issue, and we avail ourselves as the council, as the private sector, as those who will be invited to invest in these opportunities, to work with Sun Parks and among others, and to work with government to make sure that we realize transformation through those public-private partnerships. So we're quite encouraged about that, Chair, and we're quite grateful. But we want to use that to also extend a call to say a lot of these assets, fall under other spheres of government, provincial government, local government, and some of them are in a somewhat derelict state. And we think that those assets, Chair, provide an opportunity for us to really accelerate transformation. If we can work with our counterparts in government to put in place the frameworks and the support mechanisms that are necessary to realize transformation through unlocking those assets, and many of which, Chair, are severely, significantly underutilized. And so we think there's an opportunity there, and we put up our hand and we avail ourselves to work with our counterparts in government to unlock and realize those opportunities. So I just wanted to start by touching on those, Chair. Going further, Chair, I think that, we as the council, one of the things that we've really identified that we need to do as a matter of urgency is to improve the evidence base on transformation. A number of studies have been done in the past. They've given us some useful insights that have helped shape our thinking. But there's also been areas of weakness in those studies. My background is that of a professional researcher. I've looked at some of these studies. I've had more questions raised by some of them than answers provided. So as the council, we've actually decided that this is an area that we need to focus on and really provide not just ourselves as the private sector, but our counterparts in government as well, a very solid and rigorous evidence base on the state of transformation in the sector. And to that effect, Chair, we are planning, this is in early stages, but we're planning to engage a consortium of universities, public universities, work with them, and the Transformation Council, South African Tourism Transformation Council, to really undertake an in-depth evaluation of the state of transformation, right across the spectrum in the e-scorecard. We believe that an exercise like that, shared with the council, involving our brains trust in our universities, will help not only the council, but will help government, to really take a deep dive into the state of transformation. And that will lay a basis, of course, building on the studies that have been done before, will lay a basis for us to be able to dialogue from a more informed basis about the state of play in the industry. So this is an initiative that we're embarking on, Chair, this year, and we hope that it will really meet our expectations in terms of giving us this evidence base that we think we desperately need. And moving on, Chair, from that, one of the things we really want to bring to the fore is we would like to call on government and our counterparts in government to really improve, work with us, to really improve their monitoring and evaluation of the transformational impact of the instruments that government has put in place. We're grateful for the instruments like the Tourism Transformation Fund, like the Tourism Equity Fund, which unfortunately is still facing some difficulties, which but we still, we're grateful for those initiatives. These are attempts by government to come alongside and accelerate transformation. But I think it is always helpful. Again, I say, I'm a researcher by profession, and I really believe in evidence-based. And sometimes I think it would help us a tremendous deal if we can take a deep dive into those instruments and really, see the extent to which they are aiding the process of transformation. And this is an exercise that we as the private sector would like to participate in as well, so that if there are changes that need to be made, there are improvements that need to be made, those can be made in the interests of advancing transformation. So the call that we would humbly make to our counterparts in government is, please, can we take a review of these important instruments? We recognize their importance, of these important instruments that government has put into place, but really ask the hard questions. Is the Tourism Transformation Fund doing what it was set up? Is the Tourism Equity Fund, with the difficulties, unfortunately, that it ran into immediately, and has not started operating? We recognize that, but when it starts operating, is it helping to contribute towards what it was set out to do? So the whole thing of monitoring and evaluation and impact assessment within government, we think is an area that needs to be strengthened, because it will give us the evidence base that we need together as a collective, but certainly us in the private sector, to be able to accelerate transformation. I'll wrap up, Chair, by talking about issues of SMEs, youth, and perhaps women. In fact, let me talk about youth first before I come to SMEs. We are the first ones to acknowledge that we continue to have serious challenges when it comes to absorbing our young people into the sector, and there's a lot of issues involved. There's some are structural, of course, the state of play in the industry, the state of the economy. We all recognize these things. But really, this is where we think it's important for us to work very closely and very constructively, with counterparts, for instance, in universities in terms of the skills that they put out, and CETAs in terms of facilitating not only the skills development, but also opportunities for young people to enter the industry. These are those areas where I said are shared, where we'll really need to together put our brains trust and come up with constructive solutions. We're very encouraged to see, Chair, an initiative by South African Tourism, and I recognize a colleague is here, a recent initiative by South African Tourism and Nedbank, which is a capacitation of women entrepreneurs in tourism across the country. It's a young initiative, but it's one that we've welcomed with excitement, and we'll be watching the progress of that program. And we think that we need interventions such as those going forward. And of course, there are others as well, like women in tourism that are encouraging. Again, back to the point that I made, we need to be vigilant to make sure that these initiatives, that many of which use public resources, we are really honest with ourselves in terms of how they're performing and how they're helping us drive the transformation agenda. So let me wrap up, Chair, with on the SME front. SMEs are my passion, and it's an area that I'm involved in quite extensively. I have spoken about the need to review government programs. The National Department of Tourism puts a lot of money into the development of small businesses and incubation programs and that kind of stuff. I'm really quite keen to get the evidence base on the success or otherwise and the contribution of those programs. I have not seen one I have not seen one, period. And I think that when we're spending public resources like this, it's important that we do these exercises. So I would call on our counterparts in government to do that. Hanali has spoken at length about the impact of regulation, so I'm not going to repeat what she said, but Chair, I think it's only fair to also express our gratitude as the industry for the initiative that the President has taken in announcing the red tape task team to be headed up by Mr. Ross. We really think that's a significant development, and all we would say is that as the private sector, dealing with the issues that have been raised not just by Hanali, but by our colleagues in aviation, as the private sector, we're really putting up our hand to say, with this new development of the setting up of this red tape task team, putting our hand up to say we would like to dirty our hands and get involved in those spaces, because I think it was Hanali who touched on the point. There are transformation issues as well. We can't escape that. If we're creating impediments for independent entrepreneurship to take off in our sector through inappropriate regulation, then we have an issue there. So we are putting up our hands there, Chair, to say this task team that has been set up, please call on us anytime. Let's work together to remove those impediments and ease the environment for doing business across the spectrum for SMEs. Two last things, Chair. We're very excited as the Council that we will soon be, we're in early discussions, soon be partnering with the International Labour Organization through a program funded by GIZ, the German Development Agency. It's called the SURE program. What does SURE stand for now? Sustainable and Resilient Enterprises. Yes, I think that's what it stands for. SURE for short. I'm personally very excited about that program, Chair, because it deals with the issue that is a pressing issue on our side, the issue of resilience, especially of our SMEs. And I think COVID-19, showed this up, very early on, very quickly, that, with all the investments that we're making in SME support, which is why, Chair, I made a point earlier that we need to really review these programs and see what difference they're making. We saw very early on in the onset of COVID-19, how many SMEs immediately, started battling. And we asked our questions, are we building resilient enterprises? Yeah. And I think, this program is going to equip SMEs with critical tools around a number of areas to show up their resilience. And I think, the discussions that we're having are really promising, and the program itself is a quality program. It's been tested in other parts of the world. It's been tested in South Africa as well. and now we want to bring it into the tourism sector. We're very excited about that, and we hope that it's one that we will share the responsibility for financing with our counterparts in government. But that program is coming, Chair, and it's our attempt as the Council to come alongside SMEs who are struggling under the heavy load, the heavy burden of COVID-19, and see how we can equip them with the necessary tools to show up their resilience. And so that's coming, Chair, and we're quite excited about that. Lastly, Chair, and I cannot finish this presentation without making this point. I think we'll really need, Chair, to focus on digitalization. You know, we all understand that tourism is gone digital. The whole world, the global economy has gone digital. And I mean, we have had the privilege with Journey of traveling around the country in the past couple of weeks. We started in Richards Bay, Mhlatuzen. Last week we were in Kokstad, interacting with SMEs, and you know, just talking about digitalization. And it was striking to us to recognize, you know, how SMEs themselves recognize the importance of going digital, but they don't have the tools, they don't have the resources, the wherewithal. And I think that, you know, going forward, some of our programs from government need to really focus on this issue, Chair, of driving, you know, digitalization. Journey is on a program together with us of rolling out their platform to SMEs across the country. That's critical because it's going to give SMEs the digital tools, some of the digital tools they need in order to traverse, you know, the difficult environment we're in and be more competitive in the future. So in future programs, making a strong call that, you know, there needs to be a stronger focus on digitally enabling SMEs to be able to run sustainable and resilient businesses. Chair, let me stop there. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Septi, with that in-depth feedback to this committee on an issue that is critical for our sector and our country, which is transformation. I think, Chair, you would see that we, as TBCSA, we wanted to make sure that transformation is not left behind as the sector is recovering. And Septi is the right person for the job. Thank you so much for that, Septi.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, we are wrapping up now, and we'll hand over to you. I think just a few points, some of the points that are here we've covered. One of the key areas that we're driving as a sector is the vaccination of the sector, the frontline staff, to make sure that we give that confidence to our guests, whether they're domestic or international, is that as a sector we are vaccinated. Chair, I'll ask Chief to quickly talk about the Advocacy Program, which is launched by SAT, and our participation there. We partnered with the SAT. Maybe Chief, just in a few minutes, talk about Advocacy Program and the need for dealing with the travel advisors. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things that's quite important is that, you know, post or living with COVID, and the fact that as a destination, we have been labeled, you know, by the names of the variants that we discovered. It's quite important that we defend our destination. It's quite important that we show the positivity of the destination. And to that effect, the program that has been launched by South African Tourism is going to be key in terms of dealing with travel advisories. We do know that currently, as a destination, we have adverse travel advisories that are, you know, aimed at us. Some of them are COVID-related, some of them are safety and security related, and others. So it's important that we rebrand ourselves and we go and advocate for our own destination, and we make sure that we return to some level you know, of likability, where we're going to get more people coming into the country. So that program is going to go a long way, and the beneficiaries of that program are obviously going to be the workers in the tourism space. When we get, you know, more tourists coming into the country because they look at us positively. So it's quite important that we deal with all these big stumbling blocks. Quite important that we deal with things that are preventing, tourists outside of issues that we can control. But these are issues of, the brand repositioning, as I've said, the travel advisories, and many other issues that are quite important across the world. So we will be participating on that, making sure that, we work together and we hunt as a pack, because when we all hunt as a pack, we come back all winning, and the beneficiaries are the economy of South Africa and the workers in South Africa. So that program is quite critical for us. We are participating as a private sector. We will continue to participate, and we'll make sure that, those, that are wanting to travel to South Africa are converted into real passengers and get on the planes and come down to South Africa. So that program it's going on. And as I've said, we are participating and will continue to participate.
Thanks, CEO. Chair, the last few points we've covered, like the harmonization of travel protocols within SA and SADC. Aaron addressed that issue. The only other issue that we didn't talk about, and this is something that we get as private sector from the source markets, that we need to go back to the creation of South African specialists in the source markets. And these are people that SA Tourism was instrumental in training and making sure that they have the intimate knowledge of the destination. And we find that now when people are traveling, they ask really pertinent questions about the destination. So in conjunction with SAT, we'd like to make sure that we revisit that. And as I always say with TBCSA, when we say we want to do these things, we prepare to contribute financially towards these things that will improve the reputation of our destination. We talked about the consumer concerns and partnering with our overseas operators that we've addressed. Chief, you want to go to the slides? Chair, in conclusion, really in thanking this committee for the opportunity once again for allowing us to share what's happening in the sector. And Chair, I must say we are grateful that, even within the department, we're getting great support from the department on the issues that we've raised, on the issues that relate to other departments. We never had a situation where the department said, you private sector, you're on your own. So we're grateful for that. And to this committee for always allowing us to share the issues that are challenging in the industry, and also to see how we collectively take these issues forward and for a speedy resolution of the sector to make sure that we regain the jobs that were lost. The PCR test, Chair, we talked about that needs to be addressed. It remains an issue that makes us uncompetitive as a destination. And PTR issue, we need an urgent resolution. It's a bottleneck in the growth of our sector as we recover. And our recommendation, Chair, is maybe you can talk to your counterparts in transport or the Ministry of Transport. We've tried everything we can to get this thing over the line. But, 7 years later, we're still not succeeding, Chair. Backlog on Air Licensing Council that we've talked about, the meetings and incentive industry to allow meetings to take place in a much bigger capacity. We've talked about that, and allowing spectators to the stadiums to make sure that we help with the recovery of the sector. Chair, I want once again to thank you and your committee, and to thank the Minister of Tourism, and once again for the opportunity to share these issues with you and to have this briefing. Thank you so much to you, to my colleagues. I hand over back to you, Chair. Thanks once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Komani, together with your team from TBCSA. Honorable members, these are our private sector partners. They rely on us to create an environment that is conducive for the businesses to flourish and to operate. We say tourism in its nature is a sector that is dependent on other sectors to be able to operate. Where there are bottlenecks in other sectors, they will not be able to operate in an environment that allows the businesses to grow, whether small, whether medium, or large enterprises. If I listen carefully to the presentation, is that these partners, these private sector partners, are coming to us. They constantly do come to us, and they want to have a relationship where they can interact with members of parliament and tell them where the bottlenecks are, where the red tapes are, so that as legislators, we are able to interact with our counterparts. We know previously that there are systems and regulations that are put in place by another sector that has unintended consequences on the tourism space. We can recall that when the travel regulations were imposed by Department of Home Affairs, when the unabridged birth certificate was introduced, it had unintended consequences on the tourism space. We see now that there are also systems that are put in place or regulations that are put in place, especially the PCR test. It has unintended consequences on the tourism space. However, ours is to listen and make decisions from an informed position. I will now invite honorable members who will interact with the presentations as presented to us by our private sector partners from TBCSA. I will call upon first the Honorable Winkler, who will be followed by the Honorable Gomba in that sequence.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to all the presenters today. I have some follow-up questions and perhaps some questions to elaborate on what has been already discussed. So in terms of the airlines, and for instance, the routes that have now become available post the COVID lockdown or restrictions, are there any other significant routes that still need to be reinstated? For example, you did mention the Air Mauritius routes. For instance, there was a direct flight between Durban and Zanzibar that was offered by Mango. And I know that there have been quite a few complaints about that direct flight not being available anymore, and what the impact has been then on tourism coming into specific areas because these direct flights or routes are not available any longer. So maybe some just further elucidation on that. Then also with regards to the state of our airports as they stand, I understand it's not exactly the purview of tourism, but definitely the first impression that overseas travelers get once they come into a South African airport is that a lot of the facilities have become quite dilapidated. I would say the bathrooms, especially a lot of the airport maintenance, I think has somehow fallen by the wayside. Is that also an issue that has been picked up by the council and other stakeholders? Because I have received complaints from overseas guests on that issue. With regards to the operating licenses, dilemma that we're facing, and there seems to be a breakdown of communication between tourism and the Department of Transport. I know that there was also an issue last year. I think the chairperson of the Private Charter Passenger Association, her name was Fiona Brooke-Leggett, I believe. She had brought to our attention that the private tour operators had a problem with the licensing. They were expected to pay sometimes into the hundreds of thousands for licensing fees for their buses, which they weren't able to operate during the lockdown, which really caused heavy financial strain on many of those businesses. And many were forced to shut down and to let a lot of their employees go. And has there been, I would say, any resolve to that issue? I know that the DG of Transport had said that those licenses would be extended so that these operators wouldn't have to once again pay for another annual fee where they couldn't operate. And that is a similar issue, I'm guessing, where there's a breakdown in communication with the Department of Transport, similarly to the operating licenses. Then the other question I have is about the resilience of the sector. And I think someone from the gentleman from the Tourism Business Council did highlight that they're trying to become more, I would say, economically resilient to shocks to the sector. And what discussion, if any, has taken place around the impact of climate change on the sector going forward? Because we are projected to have quite a significant rise in temperatures, and that is going to affect the southern region most significantly, with a projected 4 degrees increase in temperature, which is going to see terribly hot temperatures in the interior. We're also going to see rising sea levels along coastal communities. So I know that the department has undertaken some pilot projects, I believe, with some in the hospitality sector to discuss climate resilience, but just from the council's perspective, and whether or not there is a sense of urgency to address tourism and the purported loss in millions of income if we don't prepare ourselves for the impact of climate change. Yeah, that is impending. Thank you.
Honorable Gomba.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And let me start by thanking the presentation that is very much comprehensive and appreciated. Honorable Chair, my questions are very few because the presentation was very clear to us. Honorable Chair, my first question is that have the department, let me say, the TBCSA contacted the Department of Health in terms of licensing challenges that they have? Have they spoken to the Department of Health in terms of, I know that they have a problem with, like they've mentioned, with the PCR testing. Maybe if did they raise such issues, especially, Honorable Chair, when I think about the long hours traveling with a mask on, and maybe a 12-hour international flight, and you have to be wearing your mask for 12 hours. I don't think even the Department of Health will condone that. So we want to understand, how do they think between the department and the aviation, how will they deal with that? And also the Home Affairs, I think it is important for us to also get whether the update from them, whether the e-visa is already functional, or is it in place, or it's not yet in place. Because I remember there was a proposal for the e-visa, and whether it is really assisting or not. And Honorable Chair, I would also like to know about the routes which are still not open for international travel from South Africa going to international, or the international flights which are not opened from international to South Africa. Do they still have that challenge or not? And also, Honorable Chair, I want to know if there is a way of them assisting or influencing the redesigning of international routes. Because some of the international routes, I'll make an example, Honorable Chair, where you find that in order for you to travel to London, you have to via Dubai. Is there no straight flights going from Johannesburg, OR Tambo Airport, International Airport, straight to London? Even in African countries, we still have complaints that people are saying they have to via in some of the international countries in order to via from the South African airport to the Northern African countries, which are in Africa, but you still have to travel to the other outside countries in order to get to the same Africa where you're coming from. So those long routes are really discouraging our tourists. We really need to look at how we can make the routes very simple and easy to travel to South Africa to and from those countries, or from South Africa to those other countries. It is very, very much inconvenient in some of the areas. People even spend more than 2 days on the road, getting into the flight, getting off to the flight, boarding in and boarding out. It is very disembarking and to other countries where you are not supposed to be, but you are supposed to be into the next destination. So I believe that we really need to request that they try to work on the routes to be smarter than what they are now. Honorable Chair, again, the last question here is about our neighboring countries like Lesotho, Botswana, and other borders which are closer to us and going up to Africa. This the PCR, are they only representing the international and the flight tourism, or they also do deal with our neighboring borders, which are the neighbors of South Africa? So I want to also find out, or you only represent the international using the flight as a traveling mode? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Gomba. I now invite the Honorable Mpushe, who will be followed by the Honorable De Freitas.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, the Chairperson of the Board. Chair, mine will only be to appreciate the informative and comprehensive presentation that has been done. Also welcome the improvements that have been made within the sector. At least there is hope, Chair. Also noting the areas that need our intervention, like the lifting of the PCR test for fully vaccinated travelers. Also noting the question, Chair, on the Transformation Fund contribution, Chair. Is it indeed contributing to what it was meant for, Chair? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mpushe. Honorable De Freitas.
Thanks, Chair. My apologies. I'm going to keep the camera off because my signal isn't too stable. And thanks to the presenters who made the presentation and their frankness with the information they had. I'm not sure if the minister's still on. I'd be very interested, Chair, to hear from her. What is she doing to resolve these issues? I know very well the licensing permit issue. It goes back to many years, in fact, even before, when I was on the Transport Portfolio Committee, where they are obstructionists, quite frankly. These people want to grow tourism. Ironically, we keep talking about transformation, and it is all South Africans, but those that we want to transform that are suffering the most, because these licenses, these permits aren't being issued, and it's absolutely shocking. So I'd be interested to hear from the Minister, what is she doing to talk to the Department of Transport to speed this up? Now, I've written to various officials, to the Department of Transport and so forth, because people have approached me in this regard. And it is completely frustrating. It's clear that those people in the NPTR are having a clue of what tourism is about. In fact, they haven't even got a clue what transport is about and permitting and why it's required. And it is a dire situation. I think the speakers were very frank, but I think they were very diplomatic, because it is a dire situation. People are losing their jobs because of the inefficiency of this department. So I'd like to know what the minister is doing and talking to her counterpart to loosen up these dead ends
so that our tourism can really be expanded. My second point is also to ask the minister as well as what is she doing, or is she speaking to her counterpart in health, because they are the ones responsible for the PCR tests. This is an easy win for us. Our neighboring countries have done it. They got rid of it. And basically the whole world has. We're, as usual, lag behind in these things, and we are giving our tourism away to our competitors, namely places like Kenya and even places like Rwanda now and so forth, that are our competitors. They are direct competitors. And when tourists from our big markets look at South Africa and they see how difficult and expensive it is to come here, they're going to find somewhere else to go. So I want to know, what is the minister doing? Is she speaking to her counterparts? And if not, when is she going to do this? Because we are losing millions in revenue and, of course, in jobs and everything else that goes with it. That's really all I have. All the other things have been answered. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Honourable De Freitas. Can I invite the Honourable April, who would be followed by the Honourable S. Maneli, Cindy Maneli. Honourable April. The Honourable Hein April. If the Honourable April is not on the platform, Honourable Maneli.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to the members of the committee. Chair, let me also take the opportunity and acknowledge and welcome the very informative presentations. I only have got two questions, Chair. In terms of the informal businesses, which are highly affected, I'd just like to establish, Chair, that in terms of the assistance, because there is some assistance that was provided, but were these also part of that assistance, and also if some of them were able to recover, in cases where they were not able to recover, what measures are there in ensuring that they are resuscitated? My second question, Chair, will be, though some members have touched on that, the effect on the subscription of members, because most members, we've learned that they were requested to make subscriptions, though they were highly affected by COVID. Probably as a last point, Chair, to note that from the presentation, indeed, there's a request for us as a committee to intervene in ensuring that there's a smooth recovery path on the tourism sector. I think as the committee, we'll have to deal with that in ensuring that we interact with other stakeholders in ensuring that indeed this recovery road becomes a smooth one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maneli. Can I invite the Honourable Mieni, who will be followed by the Honourable T.S. Kleko? Honourable Mieni. If the Honourable Mieni, are you on the platform?
No, I'm covered by other speakers.
Okay, we will now move to the Honourable T.S. Kleko.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Good morning, everyone in the platform. Chairperson, my apologies. I'm off camera. The weather is not good on my side, but the network is allowing me to speak today. Chairperson, I think TBSA has identified these challenges, and they are now bringing them to us as portfolio committee in a way of asking for assistance. What I think we must do as a committee is to note them and look for partners, because we are not the only ones to address the challenges. Ours is to identify who is doing what, where, and refer some that they have identified to those relevant authorities. Chairperson, thank you very much for affording me the opportunity after the presentation, which I welcome as other members of the Portfolio Committee. Chair, I think the presentation is reminding us of the impact of COVID-19. Let me put it that way. Also reminding us of the effects of government's decision or actions to curb the spread of COVID-19. What I want to put forward, Chair, is that all of us in the country, or most of the Portfolio Committee, wants the sector to fully recover. We are interested in that. But Chair, in the same vein, we don't want to make the country vulnerable to the virus again. So we note the challenges as raised as the Portfolio Committee, but I will talk to challenge by challenge with regards to what has been raised. On the challenge that has been raised with regards to PCR testing requirement, Chair, whilst we will be doing our homework to identify other partners as Portfolio Committee, I think as of now, we must lift the challenge to the level of the minister so that the minister can be able to take the matter to the Command Council, where I think these matters are discussed, because it's a matter of national importance. If the Command Council is no longer active, it be taken to the level of the Cabinet. We will remain as Portfolio Committee following it up and identifying other partners in order to address that challenge as it has been raised. With the challenge that involves aviation, Chair, I think as the Portfolio Committee, we must dig deeper to identify these challenges and other challenges that we may get, Chair. But in the meantime, we must engage the transport and aviation authorities. What we wish are the safer skies, Chair, as it used to be in South Africa. With the challenge that they have mentioned as inbound challenge, issues of red tape and whatever, I think as a Portfolio Committee, we have started our homework. It means there is something common between this challenge, because you will remember what we did last week as a Portfolio Committee, engaging those authorities in that space, Chairperson. I think we have started. That it seems, to me, it seems as if that challenge is cutting across. So we have started, we will continue doing it as a Portfolio Committee. I think we must commit on that one, Chair. I think, Chairperson, as a Portfolio Committee, it will not be a once-off thing to try to address these challenges they are raising. We've been doing it. We will continue to try to level the ground for tourism to contribute, so that they contribute to the economic growth of the country, Chairperson. I think we must continue to do our homework. I was just commenting, Chair, on the presentation and making some recommendations. Now I just want to put up front a question that says, now that there is a judgment, Chairperson, on the implementation of the BBBE policy of government, which I think it has brought the tendering and procurement of the country, it has brought uncertainty, as I understand its implications now. What is it what is it that they are saying as a council, now that those that are previously disadvantaged are being disadvantaged by this judgment now? That's the only question that I am putting forward to them, just to understand how they view the judgment as a council. Others, I was making recommendations. On others, I was just acknowledging the challenges and highlighting what we will do as a portfolio committee, where I lobby also the support of the department to assist as they were continuing to assist in addressing the challenges that we continue to identify as the portfolio committee. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable TS. Honorable members, we remain committed as the Portfolio Committee on Tourism to unearth and make ease and ensure that red tapes are dealt with in the tourism space. However, we rely on the our counterparts in other portfolio committees, that is our colleagues in the other portfolio committees, which we need to lobby if we believe strongly that they need to be lobbied in terms of easing some of the restrictions and ensuring that the environment is made conducive for tourism to flourish. It's not as easy as things happening tomorrow or the PCR test being dropped tomorrow, because we need to understand that there is what informs the PCR test. So for us as the portfolio committee is to understand from a health perspective before we make any pronouncement on saying let's drop the PCR test. We understand that the sector is saying it becomes an inhibitor, or it becomes a red tape, or it becomes something that it will deter the tourist, and the tourist will go to a destination where the PCR test is not a requirement. However, there are health protocols that were put in place to curb the spread of the coronavirus. We are guided by these health protocols, in which we will continue to be guided. I also want to caution members of the portfolio committee on this engagement with the TBCSA partners, that they requested to come to the portfolio committee and brief us on the status of the tourism sector, where in the sector which they are operating in. Today they came to the portfolio committee and they felt that they need to engage us as a collective of the portfolio committee in Parliament. They did not come to the Minister of Tourism. They will make arrangements to meet with the minister. But for us, they understand that we have got distinct responsibilities as members of Parliament. Our responsibilities to do oversight on the department. And I caution members from wanting the minister to respond to issues that are brought to the attention of the portfolio committee. We know what are the systems in place for us to be able to engage with the department and engage with the minister. And we allow and welcome this interaction from TBCSA as they came to lobby us. And if we believe strongly that we need to go to our counterparts, our colleagues in the transport sector and in the health, we will do so, because we believe that there is a case that has been put forward, and we are understanding, we are wanting the tourism sector to fully recover, because it will be for the benefit of the country as a whole. It will create the much needed job opportunities. It will make the vulnerable worker who has been laid off to return to their workspaces. It will allow for families to put bread back on the table, and it would allow for the businesses that have closed down or that are barely not breaking even to start recovering. Those were just my few comments on our responsibility as the portfolio committee and our interaction with yourself, and also how do we bring the minister on board in terms of this interaction. We will put together our recommendations and put together the points that we'd want to get to the attention of the minister in terms of us understanding where the coronavirus command council is, or what is their take, or what is the rationale on the PCR test. Further than that, we cannot promise anything, but say that we will be guided by those that are in the health sector and those that are expertise in this. As Honorable TS has put it correctly, that we do not want to open up the country to be vulnerable to the virus. We are still recovering from the devastation of this COVID pandemic, and we do not want, while we are on the recovery path, to go back to where we were in terms of the country losing the many lives that we've lost through this virus. I will now invite you, Mr. Komani, as the leader of this delegation and the chairperson of the board of this council, to be able to interact in terms of questions and comments with the members of parliament. You will spread the responses as you have rightfully done with the presentation to your member colleagues who will be able to respond and make comments from this interaction with the members of parliament. Over to you, Mr. Komani.
Thank you so much for those comments and your measured response on these issues. And I appreciate the questions from the honorable members. As Chair, as you have said, we'll go through some of the questions. There are questions that I will ask that we be given a chance to consult with my board. We have a strategy session tomorrow, and that question relates to our view on the recent Constitutional Court judgment on procurement, which we have studied, but as a board, we haven't deliberated it at a board level. So I'll ask the question that Honorable Trego raised, that we write back to the Secretariat, will filter it down to the committee chair. Chair, I must say your response, your initial comments about the unintended consequences, about some of the regulations are spot on, Chair. And that is why we appreciate coming to this committee, just to share issues. And Chair, so I appreciate that you can connect the dots as to where some of the regulations have hamstrung the sector. The issue of PCR, Chair, you're absolutely right. We cannot trade off our health imperative for commercial reasons. And that is why, Chair, we were the first sector, and I'm proud to say that we share those protocols with this committee. We're the first sector to come up with tourism travel protocols to ensure that this sector doesn't contribute to the spread of the virus. So we've always maintained that we want to make sure that although we want the sector to grow, we also want to make sure that we help with the curb of the spread of the virus. And I'm proud to say that those protocols have now become part of the norms and standards that are adopted by the department and thereby by the cabinet. Chair, I'm going to go through some of the questions, maybe starting with Honorable Winkler. And I'll ask George and Aaron to comment on the significant routes that needs to be reinstated. That was the first question. She made an example of Mango. The second question was the state of the airports. So I think maybe, George, you can go first on those two issues, and then we'll get to Haneli to talk about the dilemma of the NPTR. So, George, maybe go first.
Thank you, Chair. I think just generally speaking on the issues of the different market that still needs to be opened up, as Aaron has said earlier, that the issue of the frequencies with the Department of Transport, that backlog in itself impacts on a whole number of decisions that are supposed to be made by airlines. I mean, we know from an international point of view that Joburg is the primary hub into the South African environment, obviously followed up by Cape Town. We see what Delta is trying to do also to try and with the department to, get into a direct flight, from the US to Cape Town. So those are some of the key markets that are due to open up. But those are the two primary, hubs that get into the South African environment. So if you look at the issues such as Mango, we obviously know that what COVID has done, quite honestly speaking, to a number of not only South African airlines, but some of the international airlines that went into business rescue, some went into liquidation, and obviously decisions are made by individual airlines. We know that at this point in time, the restructuring of Mango is something that still needs to be finalized for them to continue operating the route that's been referred to, which is the Durban route. But Air Mauritius has been back in the country. It started as far back as the 9th of January 2021. I've had some discussions with the chair of Air Mauritius, obviously, as part of our broader objectives to maintain and ensure that the South Africa becomes and continues to become to be an attractive destination for our airlines. But as to some of the other issues, maybe let me start with the airport maintenance one. It's a very difficult one because, in a sense, that's an AXA matter that needs to be responded by AXA. But at operational level, we've also received, some of the complaints, especially around the OR Tambo, as a hub. We know and we've seen, I think, what has been reported in terms of the huge losses that have been suffered by AXA, and AXA is obviously trying to re-strategize in terms of getting itself back into the profitability level. But some of these issues that you are raising, we do raise them ourselves with the relevant general managers of the different airports in terms of, just making sure that at least the basic stuff from a maintenance point of view are maintained, because you get complaints from passengers, and that obviously in itself would end up having our airports dilapidating and impacting on decisions that are supposed to be made by travelers, whether to continue to come to an environment. An airport is your point of entry, and that's the first thing that attracts you in terms of a country. So I think that's an issue that we will continue to raise up with AXA. As to whether or not there are direct flights, yes, definitely. I mean, direct flights to London, obviously, a lot of people do complain about, the Emirates strategy in terms of moving everybody into Dubai. But, as an association, we obviously don't get involved at individual level with airlines when they decide on their market. But that strategy of Emirates is really intended, to profit their tourism, into that country. We have Virgin Atlanta that's flying directly between Joburg and London. SAA, again, we've seen the announcement that has been made around SAA in terms of getting a private equity partner, taking over the 51%. They've restructured their business and they continue to do so. They focused mainly on the Africa market. And Chair, I'm answering this question at a general level, because where we are as an association, one needs to remember that we are limited by the Competition Act in terms of, what we can discuss with members. And part of that responsibility is for us not to be getting more involved into markets and pricing and stuff like that, and encouraging them to participate in different markets, because that in itself would get, the association into trouble. So I'm giving the broader answers in terms of what is out there in the market as we see it with our different members. So we are not in a position, obviously, to our job is to encourage members to continue operate, their flights into the South African environment without necessarily dictating to them as to which of the market they need to look into. Our responsibility and objective is to raise the broader issues that impacts on those key decisions that have to be made, to facilitate the ease of travel for passengers and consumers around, your direct flight. It is frustrating to have to go through Dubai all the time, but obviously for Emirates, it's and for the country in itself, it's beneficial to them. But those are some of the decisions that needs to be made by airlines. Hence, we raise the issues of frequencies. Hence, we raise the issues of the PCR at a broader level, as some of the issues that are raised by our members, which are really impacting on some of the key decisions that they have to make around, continued travel within the South African environment. Again, the issue of direct flights, we are still in a recovery space, and I think a lot of airlines are deciding on the level of profitability. Airlines can stomach, whatever losses for a particular period for a route. And until such time that we are seeing the numbers, growing, as we indicated earlier, that the domestic market has been quite good because it's been freely available as opposed to the international market. But we're seeing more and more of the international travelers coming back into the country with the country opening up. And that in itself is enabling, our members, to continue maintaining South Africa as a desired destination, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we continue to do so. Chair, I think that will be all, unless if there's any particular question that I haven't answered. As I said, one needed to just answer those questions within the limitations of the competition law, so that we are not necessarily, outside what the association's mandate is, as they cannot discuss certain matters with airlines. Thank you, Chair.
George, I think the question that Honorable Winkler asked was, are there any significant routes that are still not operating in your view?
Not really. As we said, that about 80% of our airlines, of the 31 members, are already back in the country. That clearly tells you that you are almost left with a few airlines that still needs to decide to come back into the country. But again, in terms of increasing markets, as we said, the issue of finalizing, the backlog with the Department of Transport in terms of frequencies in itself does impact on those different markets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Aaron, do you have anything to add on this?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So I think to answer the question, to add to what my colleague, Mr. Motema, has said with regards to the route network, two things are important for us to share with the Portfolio Committee. The first one is that South Africa was one of the first 18 countries that signed up to the Single Africa Air Transport Market when it was promulgated at the AU in January 2018. And that is significant in that by being a signatory, it means that South African airlines can operate to any destination on the African continent without any limitation of frequencies or capacity. And that also gives the opportunity for other African airlines to operate into and out of South Africa without limitation on capacity and frequency. The importance of that, Chair, is number one, to the effect that we've been asked this question by Honorable Winkler about what routes are not operating at the moment. And I did mention in my input earlier on Madagascar, for example. One of our airlines, Airlink, used to operate between Johannesburg and Antananarivo, as well as Nosy Be. And because of the COVID restrictions, there was a shutdown, there was a lockdown, and they were not able to operate. And the Madagascan authorities have now announced that they are open. And to our amazement and our chagrin, to say the truth, we were very disappointed to hear that they were open to everybody else to fly to and out of Madagascar, except South Africa. And we don't understand the reason why. Why are we being discriminated against when everybody else is being allowed to fly to and out of Madagascar? So that's a significant one for us, because there is quite a significant amount of traffic, not only for passengers, but also for cargo between South Africa and our manufacturers supply a lot of goods and equipment into Madagascar. We want to know why is that route not open to South Africa? Is there any specific reason? So that must be addressed. My colleague, Mr. Motema, also spoke earlier on about American Airlines, Delta, United wanting to fly to Cape Town. And to us, that is significant, Chair, because this issue is already being ventilated in Parliament. And I think Honorable Minister Balula has already addressed it. But there is a challenge in that the Delta Airlines want to operate, and they've been told by South African authorities that they can't operate because of the interpretation of the bilateral SMS agreement between the two countries. And until such time as that issue is resolved, it means that there's a constriction of traffic. The USA and North America is significant in terms of the traffic they bring to South Africa, and that also flows into our tourism numbers. But if they're not being able to travel because of whatever restriction, it means we're being restricted. And that goes to the next question, Chair, which talked to the significance of operations directly to places like London, for example. So earlier on, I mentioned the Single Africa Air Transport Market. It is significant in that it is an open skies policy for African airlines owned by Africans. Now, when an airline decides to fly to any destination, it is governed by traffic rights. And those traffic rights are given in relation to either bilateral air service agreement or multilateral air service agreements, or in this situation, global traffic agreements, where an operator like Turkish Airlines, for example, cannot operate from Johannesburg directly to the USA or to London because of the traffic right agreements between South Africa and Turkey, as an example. So there is quite an intricate relationship between the traffic agreements, the agreements that have been signed between the countries, the bilateral services, and the actual traffic operations that airlines can operate. So it is not entirely the fact that airlines don't want to operate nonstop. It is also because of the relationship or the bilateral service agreements that exist between countries that enable airlines to operate to and from. And the last question that I want, the input that I want to give a chairperson is with relation to the situation with our airports. Just like everywhere else in the entire world, airports are a significant component of the tourism, transport, and trade relationship, because that is your gateway into and out of a country. So with the situation that AXA find themselves in because of a lot of other issues, but particularly because of the COVID lockdown, right now the numbers that they've given us as of February 2022, most of the airports, especially OR Tambo, is operating at between 40 and 55% capacity. And it's a very big airport. To be operating at 40 to 50% capacity means that a significant part of the airport to infrastructure is actually lying redundant. If they are going to maintain all the entire facilities, the cost of maintenance can actually become a limiting factor for us, because each passenger that goes through that airport is actually paying for some facilities that are redundant. So we need to be very careful how we actually materialize the maintenance programs. And this is where we are very particular in terms of saying, maybe AXA needs to look at the opportunity for private partnership, public partnerships, where the infrastructure can be shared with other users and other interested parties so that the costs are maintained for the benefit of travelers to and from South Africa. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks so much, Aaron and George. We always want to give back the time to the chair in 10 minutes so that she can wrap up and not abuse the privilege of being here. And Annelie, just answer the question that Honorable Winkler raised on NPTR, and Septi, if you can answer the question on climate, on resilience and climate changes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. The question that was raised regarding the presentation by Fiona, that is indeed exactly the same issue that we are still talking about. An extension was provided, but that has now, I think at the end of March, it comes to an end. However, regardless of the extensions being given, we have a very active and department in traffic, the Department of Traffic. So they would still stop operators and would still request to see the permits, and regardless of the fact that receipts are in place or there has been an extension on the act, they still fine and impound vehicles. So we're sitting on the one hand with a very active and good department in checking that the operating licenses are there in the traffic department, and the Department of Transport who's not issuing. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Hanley. Septi?
Yeah, Chair, not my area of expertise, but certainly my area of interest. So I'll give an attempt, and also not wanting to preempt TBCSA strategic planning session tomorrow. But on the question of resilience and climate change, all I can say at this point, Chair and members, is that we obviously note the global developments in that area from a tourism perspective with keen interest. And I can note too that we're noting with interest. We will all remember that at COP26, the global travel and tourism industry issued a declaration, net zero roadmap for travel and tourism to 2050, I think it is. And that's, the private sector representation there is by the World Travel and Tourism Council. And of course, the other party is UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. That's something of interest to us because, of course, climate change is critical to us, and the other development being the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center with, its proposal on the establishment of a, resilience fund and resilience day. These are developments that we're watching with keen interest, and as appropriate, as a council, as the private sector will engage in. I think one opportunity, in fact, especially in relation to the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center initiative, is for a South African university, because one of the key thrusts there, going back to the point I made earlier about robust evidence base, one of the key areas there is the involvement of universities in generating scholarship and research on the issue of resilience and crisis management in tourism. Kenya is part of that already. Botswana has put up its hand. And I think that in our engagement with our South African universities, we will present an opportunity to them, to one of them at least, to put up a hand and be part of that global initiative. We need to play in these global spaces and platforms, and certainly in the area of climate change, one of the areas we see significant importance for us to play. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Septi. Once you're on the floor, want to answer the question that Honorable Maneli raised on the assistance of to the informal businesses or the SMMEs and the SMMEs?
Well, Chair, I mean, there was a relief fund that was put out by the Department of Tourism. I can't remember, I think it was about 200 million rand Helpful, but a drop in the ocean given the scope of the impact of the pandemic. But we appreciate, of course, that there were other competing priorities as far as resources are concerned. Qualifying SMEs, got 50,000 rand each. That provided some relief. There were, again, still major issues in terms of red tape, documental requirements, but the relief was welcome. Again, Chair, how big a difference it made, and how big a gap it left in terms of those who could not be assisted. We do not know because we don't have that evidence base. Hence my point earlier about really the importance in everything we do of solid empirical evidence, so we can make decisions not anecdotally, but from a point of being very well informed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Chair, the only three questions we need to answer that were directed to us are from Honorable Bomba. And the first question was, have we contacted the department? Honorable members of the Department of Health, honorable members with a great relationship with the Department of Health, up to at an operational level, up to the Minister, Minister Joe Partley. And to the extent that a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation with him on the PCR issues, and he had asked us to give him a 2-pager, which we have duly done, and he has appreciated that. So to answer that question, we work with them on a daily basis, and they're quite cooperative, Chair. So the next question, Chair, that was raised was on Home Affairs, which I'll ask Chief to, on the e-visas, which I'll ask Chief to answer. And the second question to that was the impact of PCR on neighboring on our neighboring countries or on regional. Chief, can you answer those questions and then we'll wrap up? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. On the issues around e-visas, we all know that the project of e-visa, it's a long-standing project. It has been piloted in some countries in terms of, there are still other outstanding countries like the big markets like China, India, which are quite important, and also the Eastern European countries that are part of the European Union that still require a visa to come to South Africa. And we have been in touch with the Department of Home Affairs as early as 2 weeks ago, when they're doing their own strategic planning to say, what are the countries that needs to be prioritized over and above the countries that have been identified. That we have done, we've sent through. I think the main thing with the e-visa system is that it needs to be a truly world-class e-visa system that should be able to issue visas with speed to ensure that, those that wants to come to South Africa that are coming from countries that still require visas are able to apply and be able to get the visas on time. And again, it goes to the two big markets, that we've identified, India and China. And of course, here in Africa, you've got West African countries that still require, visas, including Ghana and Nigeria. Also, the markets including, Kenya and other East African countries. So the e-visa is there. But we still need to make sure that it's a world-class, and we still need to make sure that it's responding properly to the needs of travelers and is going to support the tourism recovery. On the impact of PCR, I have spoken about it earlier in terms of what it is currently doing to our market, and I think I need to be clear to say that what we want is that the vaccinated travelers that don't have any symptoms that wants to come to South Africa should be allowed to travel to South Africa without requiring a negative PCR test. And just to add on what the chair said, we've engaged with the Department of Health directly, also through NEDLEC and many other structures, to say there is no scientist who came to us and said what we're asking for is out of ordinary. Already here in South Africa, we know that if you don't have symptoms, you don't need to be tested. And again, we already have COVID here in South Africa, and we're living with COVID. And I think what's important is how do we open up, the markets with COVID, living with COVID, but make sure that tourism recover faster. And the PCR and its impact, it's quite great. Even in the region, because when you travel to South Africa and you're going into Zimbabwe, you still, you will need a PCR on your onward journey. So that whole integration that Aaron spoke about for SADC region is important, so that we can have protocols for SADC region, so that when people travel here and move to Vic Falls or move to Zambia or wherever, they're able to travel freely without getting these frequent, tests. So I think it's quite important that it's clear that those that are fully vaccinated should be able to travel, of course, without showing any symptoms. Those that are not vaccinated, they can then have to produce, the PCR test. And if we do this right, I've spoken about the 37% deterrent, from various countries, the cost associated to it, and also the fact that people don't know whether they will be accepted to come to South Africa until last minute. So it brings this uncertainty. And also another thing that's quite important to add on the issue of PCR, that South Africans that are fully vaccinated, when they travel out of the country, when they return back home, we ignore the fact that they are vaccinated or they don't have symptoms. They have to produce a PCR test. And we believe that if we do away with that, it's going to encourage a whole lot more people to be vaccinated, which will contribute to the vaccination drive for the country. So I think it's quite important that when we look at it broader and we say, how do we make sure that we live with the virus? And how do we make sure that we protect ourselves, of which we're already doing through the protocols and the norms and standards and many other measures. But if we continue with the PCR requirement, I just got a message now, Seychelles, they've removed the PCR requirement. So many countries are following up on removing the PCR requirement for fully vaccinated. We are being left behind, and it's gonna show on our recovery. And it's gonna show when we start to count the numbers of tourists that came to South Africa. It's gonna show on the economic impact. It's gonna show on job recovery. So we just need to make the decision. I think the facts are there. And if there are scientists that are saying no to this, I think the platforms are there. But a decision has to be made to the best interest of the country's economy and the tourism economy at large. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. Any money that we throw in marketing and everything else, it might as well be a wasteful expenditure if we don't remove, the PCR requirements for fully vaccinated travel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Chair, on behalf of the sector, my board, my colleagues that participated here, thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of the issues that affect the sector, and also to have the pleasure of interacting with this committee, which now seems to be, we are doing it on an annual basis. Chair, the tourism remains committed to be the catalyst for job creation, and we do believe that we can contribute significantly in the economic recovery that our country so needs, Chair. And Chair, everything we've said here, we're happy to be partners to problem solving. We're not just dumping issues on this committee. We want to be part of the solution as a sector. But also, Chair, from your side, if there are things that you see that the sector is doing, give us that oversight from your side to say, guys, you need to fix this. We're happy to be your partners, Chair. But to you and your members, thank you for the opportunity. And to the colleagues from the department and the minister, thank you. Thank you so much. That's it from our side, Chair. Thanks once again.
Honorable members, and to TBCSA, as led by Mr. Komani, allow me to thank TBCSA as our partners. We appreciate this cordial relationship and the cordial engagement which we have with yourself. It is important at times to listen to voices coming from outside, so that as we do our oversight responsibility and functions, we are able to engage with our colleagues and our counterparts, and we are able to tell them that this is the information which we got from role players who are in the tourism sector. They are saying these are the hindrances or the bottlenecks that hamper the total recovery of the sector. So we appreciate this engagement and this cordial relationship which we have with yourself. We will from time to time be in a position to engage with yourself because you give us the much needed information from outside. You know, as I have indicated, that it is important to listen to voices coming from outside so that we are able to bring everybody on board. Because we are saying for South Africa to recover, all of us need to play our part. The private sector needs to play its part, government needs to play its part. We as legislators need to ensure that regulations and legislation that is put in place does not have unintended consequences on another sector. And it is us who can be able to mitigate and be able to leverage with our partners and inform them that this is hampering the growth of this other sector. I think, honorable members, on behalf of yourself and to TBCSA, we must appreciate this engagement. We see from this engagement that the PCR test does have unintended consequences. And it's for us to be able to, as we engage with our other colleagues and our counterparts, to inform them that these tests are hampering the growth in terms of numbers. Because even our own, if we are saying even our own people who have traveled outside, when they come back, they are subjected to the test, even though they are fully vaccinated. The test itself, we appreciate that the fees for the test has gone down, and you were very instrumental in advocating for the price of the PCR test to be reduced drastically. But however, these red tapes have unintended consequences because the traveler who wants to come to our shores does not want to be inundated with all these paperwork. So they will look at the easiest destination that gives the same products as ourselves. We know that we are competing with our fellow African countries in terms of the wildlife experience and also the coastline. We know that there are those that are next door that are saying we don't need this. So the traveler will be able to go to where they are not going to spend so much in terms of their restrictions and regulations. We have heeded to your calls in terms of the aviation space and also the transport regulation space in terms of the operating licenses. We will be knocking on the relevant doors and start an engagement with our colleagues to be able to assist the sector on its recovery path. With those few words, honorable members, let me thank TBCSA and allow them to exit the platform as we continue with our committee work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thanks, members. Thank you so much once again. Thanks.
Honorable members, Mr. Poltina, can you take us through the next item on our agenda? The next item, honorable member, is minutes of the previous meeting, which we held on the 8th of March. These were circulated to all members of parliament. Can I then invite a member to move for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of what transpired in our portfolio committee of the 8th of March?
Honorable Chair, Komba here. Honorable Chair, I move for the adoption. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I move for the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Gomba has moved for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of what transpired in our portfolio committee meeting of the 8th of March. Can I invite a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable De Freitas. Mr. Boltina, can you take us through the committee program as proposed by this portfolio committee to have a fully hybrid sitting where we are going to not be on virtual for the meeting of the 22nd of March, which is next week in Cape Town?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to indicate if okay, you say let's go to 22nd, Chair.
Let's go to 22nd before we give the
thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson. Thanks, Chair. Chair, as the committee has indicated to us that we need to have a physical committee strategic planning session. The plans are in place, Chair. All we just needed to find out now is just to get a quotation so that the House Chair can sign off that application. The application is ready, Chair. Immediately after this meeting, it will be sent through to you so that you can see it and approve before we take it to the office of the House Chairperson. And then we have asked the committee assistant to look at two areas. One area for a venue that is not far from Parliament. One, it can be the offshore area, or it can be closer in the Sea Point area, but it should be an area that is not far from Parliament, so that when we are from the strat plan, then the members are easily able to access Parliament for a 2 o'clock. For a 2 o'clock session, Chairperson. So that is the issue, is the progress on that. Chair, I want to also go to the 29th as well at the same time. Chairperson, the committee will recall that we were busy dealing with the preparations of going to Limpopo. Unfortunately, after the Thursday National Assembly Programming Committee, we were advised, Chair, that the NA has also further populated that week, the week of the 29th up to the 31st of March, with other activities. Now, it means now in that week, one, we will have a motion of a vote of no confidence to the president and the cabinet and all of that. Then the second day of that week as well, there will also be a multi-party caucus and also plus the questions to the president. Now, we met as a team to look at what are the implications of this program that has been populated in this way. One of the things that we have found out, Chair, was that if, for instance, we say, okay, let's proceed and go to Limpopo, that would effectively mean that we are going to Limpopo for only one oversight day, which when we evaluated this, we found that it will really will not yield the necessary results that we want out of that oversight, the triple Chairperson. Because the triple to Limpopo, what the committee wants to achieve out of it. One, we want to visit all those infrastructure projects of the Department of Tourism. As the department has indicated, they've got 29 community-based projects, then 10 of those projects are located in Limpopo. So what we want to see as a committee, we want to see that 10 projects that are there. One, what is on paper and what is actually existing on the ground. That's the point number one. Point number two, we also want to look at the issue of homestays there in Limpopo. Then thirdly, also, we want to look at the general state of tourism in that province and also how the provincial government responded to the whole issue of COVID-19 and all of that. So we were of the view, Chairperson, if then we look at all of these things, one day, Tuesday, only the 29th of March, will really not assist the portfolio committee to fulfill its objectives. Now, we were looking at how then can we mitigate this. One of the issues that came up was whether will it not be possible for the portfolio committee chairperson to revisit the decision of the committee that was taken in 2020. Because in 2020, the portfolio committee initiated a trip to Robben Island. And that trip was approved by Minister Natim Ted. The only thing that made the trip not to proceed, because it was planned for the 15th of April, but unfortunately on the 26th of March, then there was a lockdown. Then we had the whole situation from that time up to until today, that situation we have. Then we were saying maybe the committee will it not be able to revisit that matter, or we consider whether can't we bring up the outstanding workshop that was requested by the Auditor General to have it with the committee on these new amendments in their legislation, or one also person was also saying we also need to look as well, because we are told in Khayelitsha, we are advised that there is a new Spade Boutique Hotel Spa there, which I'm advised it's a 4-star or 5-star, and it's a fully Black owned, and it's in the township. We were also looking at that as a matter that maybe the committee may want to look at it as well, so that we can plug that date of the 29th. We can have activity there, Chairperson. So we have agreed as a team that then we need to take these options to the portfolio committee. One, we look at the possibility whether the trip to Robben Island, can't we effect it on the 29th? Or we look at the workshop with the AGA, or we look at an oversight visit to go to Khayelitsha, to that new Spade Boutique Hotel that is there, so that at least we close that gap for the 29th, Chairperson. And then we will see what the House Chair will be giving us as guidelines for the next quarter, and see then how, if it is possible, we can fit the provincial oversight to Limpopo, Chairperson. But it's quite critical, but in the circumstances where we find ourselves, one day will really not be sufficient for the committee to fulfill its objectives. Thank you, Chairperson. If the committee can give us a guidance on these three options, then we will be glad to effect that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Poltina. Honorable members, this is the report from Mr. Poltina with regards to our week, which we had planned for oversight due to the program being amended, the Parliament program, and the importance of the work that will be done in Parliament on those days, which is the motion by the Honorable Zungula of the ATM against our President, and also the leader of the opposition in terms of a motion of no confidence on the cabinet of the president. So we need to be in parliament to be able to take part. So this is a 3-line whip sitting. Therefore, members have to be there to be able to cast their vote so that we defend the gains and the position of our political parties, as we know that as members of parliament, we are constituted from members of political parties, and we do take party positions in terms of defending and advancing our agenda in parliament. And in this day of the 30th, which was in the week of the planned oversight, we had to relook and converge back to Cape Town to be able to carry out our duties as members of parliament. We are having 3 options, honorable members, as Mr. Boltina has outlined, in terms of utilizing the Tuesday as an oversight day. We have the Robben Island planned trip. We can also have the workshop from AGSA, and also we can visit the Khayelitsha product to be able to conduct our oversight and see how transformation and rural or township tourism is flourishing, to be able to engage with the owners and be able to get first-hand information on where they believe we can assist them to advance and grow further. And I am proposing, honorable members, that we strongly lean towards visiting the Khayelitsha product, as we have indicated that ours as this portfolio committee is to ensure that our small towns, our villages and our townships are developed, and those that were previously advantaged are able to leverage and be able to be included in the tourism value chain and its products. So it will be in line with our own committee agenda to be able to visit this township product in Khayelitsha. Can I get views from honorable members? You can raise your hand in the platform. I don't see any hands raised.
Chair, I've had my hand raised for a while.
Oh, I see there is the Honorable De Freitas, who will be followed by the Honorable Winkler. They will be followed by the Honorable T.S. Teko. First, Honorable De Freitas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Boltina. My understanding is that we would have originally the Monday and the Tuesday. I'm just looking at my diary. The Monday and the Tuesday that we were going to do the oversight originally. So that would be the 28th and the 29th is my understanding. And I want to suggest the following. I agree. I'm very keen to see the place at Khayelitsha, and I wanted to make the following proposal, and obviously it would depend on budgets, on the possibility of us on the Monday going through to Robben Island, and then coming back that same day, and going to Khayelitsha and possibly even stay overnight at the establishments that Mr. Boltina is talking about, and then leave the next morning. So we don't just do an oversight, but we actually experience, what it's like to be a guest in this guest house. Obviously, it would be, it has budgetary implications, so it may not be practical, but I'd like to make that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable De Freitas. Honorable Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if I've missed this, but okay, so if we're going to focus on the 28th and the 29th on those oversights, in the Western Cape. What is going to happen again to the ones in Limpopo? When would that be postponed to? And when would we consider those other oversights that I think I had proposed to the committee to KwaZulu-Natal, etc.? Thank you.
Honorable TS.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I consider the matter very important, the one of oversight, Chairperson. You are behind as a committee on our function of oversight. Chair, I am also supporting the visit to the Khayelitsha establishment as it talks directly to our mandate, but also the issue of Robben Island. I'm not far from it, but if I put those issues in order of priority, first will be Khayelitsha. I'm not opposed to what the first honorable member have raised. We can utilize both days in oversight, but if it's oversight, I'm okay, Chairperson. But I put forward the issue of Khayelitsha. In whatever manner it can be arranged, but Khayelitsha must be our priority as a committee. The visit to Khayelitsha, the how part depends on the budget and whatever implications it has, financial implications it will have. But Chair, let's carry that as a priority, the visit to Khayelitsha. That's my view, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable TS. Can I then invite the Honorable Gomba, who will be followed by the Honorable Maneli?
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think I'm covered by Honorable Shilakako. I'm covered, thank you.
Honorable Sindiswa.
Thank you, Chair. I was also going to support that we use the 2 days as it was scheduled to visit both areas in the respective days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable members are closer to each other. We are converging in terms of our responsibility and what can be done to effectively use that week, which was initially planned for oversight. We are putting to the Secretariat of the Portfolio Committee, Mr. Boltina, to utilize the 2 days. Members can travel to Cape Town on Sunday, and they can, from Monday, conduct oversight, and Tuesday conduct oversight. So we have 2 areas which we are going to be visiting, which is Robben Island. And we must also appreciate the proposal and see how best can we maneuver and work around it to say when we go to Khayelitsha, let it just not be an oversight. Let us be able to give that product in Khayelitsha some of financial muscle in terms of members of parliament having an overstay and overnight in that product if there will be availability. It is appreciated, honorable members, that we understand that for township products to be able to flourish, we need to spend. We need to give them that financial muscle, and that financial muscle is us staying over at the Khayelitsha product overnight and be able to give them the much needed boost, economic boost. So we are converging on 2 days, Mr. Boltina, that is Monday and the Tuesday. And then can I take this opportunity to address the Honorable Winkler on how we are going to be able to take that oversight to Limpopo, as indicated by the Secretariat, in the next quarter, as the program which needs to be given by the House Chairperson, Mr. Honorable Frolik, we will look at the oversight week that is planned in that second quarter, and we will be able to put back into our agenda the oversight to Limpopo. Can I also address the issue of oversight to KZN? Members will recall that before the Honorable Winkler joined our portfolio committee, because she joined it in the middle of the term, we had already had an oversight to KZN, where we had visited the Nelson Mandela capture site. We also visited Mpopomeni. Members will remind me also the Howick Falls. So we had already done our KZN province. We are now looking at other provinces in terms of ours spreading in all 9 provinces. We are earmarking Limpopo now, and on the agenda will be the other provinces before we can even think of going back to KZN. That is just a brief that I can give to you, Honorable Winkler. I see you say that there has been a green tourism incentive fund which has been successful or does not need to be significantly ramped up. I had written to the chair about the harbour crisis. Yes, you have written to the chair about the harbour crisis, but I am just giving you feedback in terms of how our oversight is conducted. We have had our oversight in KZN. It will not be fair to the other provinces if we then go back to KZN before we even visit other provinces. For now, we are taking our oversight to Limpopo to look at the 10 community products as reported by the department. From there, we will be visiting other provinces. We will see how best we can be able to integrate KZN, but I do not want to promise and say from the oversight in Limpopo, we will be moving to KZN. That is just how we conduct oversight. We do not just go to a province and constantly go to that province, but we look at how we can be able to do the geographic spread and be able to visit all other provinces. With those few words, comrades, honorable members, because you are indeed my comrades and my honorable members in the portfolio committee, I think we have now come to the conclusion of the
Madam
meeting. Yes, Honorable De Freitas.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. May I say something?
Yes, you may, Honorable De Freitas.
Yeah, I just wanted I wanted to bring it up, but you were too fast for me because you're starting to close the meeting. And I wanted to inquire, I don't know what the procedure is, and I don't want to put you or Mr. Boltino or the team on the spot. But one thing that I did talk to the previous chair about was the possibility of us going on an international trip to a country or countries that have made tourism incredibly successful and have used tourism as an economic generator, job creator, and so forth. It was an informal discussion. It was nothing formal. And I wondered, I'm presuming there's a financial year that's just started, on the possibilities of us making such a request. I know it's got to go to various people, house chairs and so forth. I wonder, I don't know if this idea has any support on the committee. I know I'm just springing it up on you, but you know, I just thought it would be an opportunity, if there is an opportunity for us to learn from other countries that have made a great success of tourism. Thank you.
The proposal is very much in order, Honorable De Freitas. In a term of members of parliament, they do undertake an international trip. What we can do is we can ask the content advisor and the researcher and give them perhaps 2 to 3 months to be able to put to us the concept and look into which country would be ideal for us to visit in terms of our committee priorities and our committee agenda, and see which country we can learn best practices. I think it's very much in order for you to bring it to the agenda of the committee so that we can start work by getting our content advisor, Dr. Kuzwayo, and our researcher, Ms. Sisanda Loni, to be able to start putting to us a concept and look at which countries, perhaps give us 3 countries, and then we can come back they can bring back a presentation to the portfolio committee, and we can engage and then take a decision, a collective decision as a portfolio committee to say which country are we inclined to. Then from there, we can then put the application to the House chairperson to be able to consider our portfolio committee for the international trip. Can I then invite Mr. Boltina to take us through to announcements?
Okay, Chairperson, thank you, Chair. I have no further announcement on my side, Chairperson. Just to add to what you are saying, Chair, I thought I was going to indicate it to Mr. De Freitas that can we take the matter to the strategic planning session so that when we deal with international study tours, then that matter can fall there. We deliberate on it, we exhaust it, and then we come up with the name, as you have indicated, Chair, of 3 countries or 5 countries where we can make a decision as to where to go. Members will recall before we once talked about where we were we spoke about France and all of those things. So a number of things happened between that time and now. Obviously, when we deal with the straight plan, I think the committee will have to give us some clear direction as to exactly from now in the term of this committee, what do we do in as far as the international study tours are concerned. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. To add on that, it is going to be our decision. It will be a collective decision. As members of parliament, honorable members and comrades, it is okay to persuade each other, to be able to engage with each other frankly, and to be able to allow yourself to be persuaded by another member. And it does not necessarily mean that we do not take views from others who are in the opposition or others who we are not inclined to or do not have the same strategic ideals, but we are, as members of parliament, engaging with each other and are open to persuasion. And that's what we are going to be doing. And that's what we are going to be doing as we plan strategically in terms of our committee this coming week. We will be allowing ourselves to be persuaded and we're going to give the team that is leading us in terms of content the opportunity to be able to bring facts before us. And therefore, once we have gathered all that, we will be able to then take a decision. With those few words, honorable members, allow me then to thank you very much for your robust engagement as members of parliament assigned to this portfolio committee on tourism. We shall see each other physically in the next meeting of the 22nd. And thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Long live the chair.
Recording stopped.